Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drink 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/Table Talk. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to EliteFTS.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
Matt with EliteFTS here at the Armory in Columbus, Ohio. This is a new build, beautiful facility. Should be opening up around November 1st, 2023. Looking at the posterior chain developer, signature version. It's going to have the logo panels on there. Reverse hypers, you can do glute ham raiser, back raise, any kind of posterior chain movement you want to do on this piece. This is really good. The best thing about this, so you just step down on the release, adjust it. So it makes it really easy to adjust these, no pop pins or anything like those sorts. So this is the signature posterior chain developer by EliteFTS.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by EliteFTS.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help EliteFTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, EliteFTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the EliteFTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Ashley Contorno, Doctor of PT, owner of Southbay Strength Co. Did your first power, I get my notes are kind of all over the place. Did your first powerlifting meet in 2016?
Yes.
And worked up to your best lifts of 592.
That's my dots.
Dots, yes. 592, I have 0.89 because I don't want to take anything away
That's
from
right.
anybody. That's what was screwing me up. I'm like, is a bench 590, but best dots 592 and best lifts of 501, 336, 523 at 165, but really like 164 if I'm not mistaken. And has worked with, and this is the part we'll get into all of it, but this is the part we're going to get into a little bit more. You've worked with a lot of top world record holders on fixing them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Other people extend therapy is kind of the way I'll look at it, but you've worked with a lot of people that's actually completely alleviated the problem.
Yeah.
To allow them to have new problems later down the line.
Yeah.
So,
Fortunately, unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's where your doctor of physical therapy kind of comes into that. Where I want to start is with the American Pro, because you were just down there.
Yeah.
And I think I watched all the sessions, so what was it like being there first off?
Well, first, when you walk in, I felt like I was in a strip club because it was so bright outside and it was so dark in there. I'm like, what is going on? I don't know what day it is, what time it is. It was an experience. Like I've never felt going into a meet.
Were you there last year?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I didn't get to go. I forget what the fuck I was doing, but I watched it and I was jealous and I was like, I know I want to do that meet next year, period. I think I just had done a big meet and I knew, the surgery. That's why I knew I was getting surgery. So I did the Pro Raw last year and it was an electric environment that I haven't felt in a meet in a really long time. And it was fun to be in a venue that exciting, like with the commentator. So I got to see the front end and the back. I got to see the warmer. I got to see all aspects of it. So we had a professional commentating area upstairs that gave us a bird's eye view of the whole venue. And it felt like a professional sporting event, which you don't really get in powerlifting.
Well, one thing in my mind when you said that wasn't so much the lifting, but because I'm sure this happens, because you're sitting there and you're watching all the little cliques of people that are just doing stupid shit, right? So actually, while you're not while you're commentating, right? What was that like? Just because basically you have a bird's eye view of the crowd at a powerlifting meet, which normally is just like people reading books and people that don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Was it half that or all that?
No, I would say everybody was engaged.
Yeah. Cool.
It was really dark in there, so it's hard to see who I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Because at one point I dressed really snazzy because I didn't get to compete, so I wanted to show off some way. I was wearing this sparkly jacket, and Maddie Forberg was like taking pictures of me up in the booth, and I couldn't see where she was. I'm like, where the fuck are you? And I couldn't find her. Yeah. And it was like a sea of people. There was a lot of people there, more than I was expecting for Manassas, Virginia. Well,
that's what Micah said. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's like a old theater.
But it does have something in common with Lorena Bobbitt. That is the city.
That's the city.
That is the same city where she did
God,
the D.
I did not know that. I did not know. They should talk more about that.
I was watching the documentary about it, and I texted Anna, and I was like, what does the American Pro and Lorena Bobbitt have in common? Yeah. She's like, don't tell me it was Manassas. I go, yes, it was.
Any standout moments for you from the meet?
I just think, honestly, I'm biased because I'm a female, but watching the women dominate the sport this year and in the past maybe 2 to 3 years is pretty incredible, that the shift of not just from my perspective, but from the spectators are actually more excited to see the females at some points.
Yeah. So it was on the last day too, right?
Yeah.
The last flight.
Yeah. That was just, and even on day 2, we had some all-time world records broken by some females. And I'm honestly very impressed at the spotting loading crew as well. I've never seen a meet ran more efficiently from that end. And David and his crew, like, they come to my gym and do my meets, and it's elevating the sport in a different way. I think the standout moment was the level of the meet. The professionalism is just elevated, and it's setting a standard that I think other people are starting to follow. And that trend, not just like, oh, I want to be cool and do these cool meets. It's like, oh, I want this meet to be professional. I want this meet I want people to watch. I want a live stream. I want this. And people are looking from the meet director perspective at a different way of monetizing and capitalizing their events.
Well, if they're going to be competitive, they have you have to look at, the USAPL Nationals or whatever they do at the Arnold, whatever that one is. So you have, when you look at the top of cross, not all, right, but most federations, those type of things that's the only way they're going to compete anymore, especially for the top lifters. And I don't know, well, you have some insight on this. How much of it is that versus prize money? So if you have that environment compared to old school environment, but I big prize
80,
money.
20.
80 which though?
80 of the environment.
Okay.
They didn't even announce the prize money, I don't think. And I could be mistaken, but I don't even think they posted it. I know, like, the week leading up to, a couple people were texting me like, do you know what the pot is? And I was like, I don't know, because they were waiting on confirmation from some final sponsors. I know there was prize money, but I think people were doing it for the environment, for that stage and that platform to be on.
I've always wondered that, because when going back to the original WPOs, and there were some money meets before that, there's only a handful of people that are going to get any money at all. Right. And it always seemed like the meet directors were trying to overly award 3 or 4 people, which earn it. I mean, they're the highest dots, Wilks, or whatever they're going off of at the time.
But everybody else gets shit.
No, it's less than that, because they're paying to get there. So it's an expense. Where I've always kind of put out there into the ether, why not lower it to, like, first place gets $3,000, which kind of covers the trip. Yeah,
that's what I think about when I do these meets. I'm like, at best, I maybe make a little bit, but it covers, because usually it's an Airbnb with me, my husband, my handler, his girlfriend, or another friend. That's a lot of money that you have a team that you need to come. And it's like, okay, I break even. That was fun.
Sure. And even if third only pays $500, at least that covers entry and maybe a day in Airbnb or hotel or whatever it's going to be. That way you have 13 times 3, 36. 36 people making a little bit of money.
Yeah.
I bet that's the same. I did this a few years ago. I actually did the math. It was less
to pay everybody a little bit.
It was. It really was. And I'm like, if I was still competing, I would be ecstatic if it just covered my costs to be able to go there, because all reality, most lifters have to save for 6 months to be able to go do the meet.
I had an interesting perspective. So I hosted the WRPF PPC finals last year in December, and it was best lifter regardless of gender. It was just based on dots, which I don't think any meet has really done that where they haven't separated male female.
I don't think so.
And the top payout was, it was 10,000, 5,000, 2,500. They paid top five, 1,500. And a bunch of elite level lifters were like, I don't want to do it because I know I'm not going to win.
I can see that.
Because the top females are so strong, and Christy Hawkins was signed up, and everybody's like, well, fuck, there goes first place no matter what, unless something happens. And it was just this easy decision for everybody. So for them, it was a decision directly about the money because it was related just for dots, because the venue wasn't, I mean, it was just my gym. It was a great venue, but it wasn't this kind of stage. Where I think because of the elevation of how they did this meet, it wasn't about the money. It was about being on this stage. So I do think that people can make that choice depending on what the meet is, but the production value made it more about the meet than about the money.
Okay. No, that answers my question, because I think that's where, for it to continue to grow, because it's been growing substantially, for it to continue to grow, just powerlifting is what I'm speaking about, then those top meets have to be more attracting. And the nationals become less attracting in a lot of different federations because they haven't really upped their game.
Right.
Where now you're starting to see that happening. And then once that happens, in their live stream and stuff like that, more eyeballs will come on. More eyeballs means more sponsorship revenue potentially with that to be able to keep growing. Where
I looked yesterday when we were on the way down here to see how many views each day had already had. Day 1, 25,000. Day 2 was 18,000, and day 3 was like 15,000 in that order already.
That's good.
In a week.
No, that's good.
Not even a week.
Yeah, because the follower count is not high. I think it's 3,000 or something like that. So
but people are
that's
watching.
Organic, right? So I'd love to know the watch time too.
Yeah.
That would be interesting data to know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of dial back with your introduction into training and all the other stuff. When you were in elementary school, I have a note here that you quit everything. So
I did.
What I like to try to figure out is, where did the athletic development base come from, right? Because there's different ages to develop certain motor abilities per se. If you go back and it's strength, endurance, visual acuity, which really doesn't matter that much in powerlifting, but where do you think a lot of that was formed for you?
I think I had a genetic advantage. I'm short, I'm stocky. Like, even before I ever dipped into PEDs, people always thought I was, because I'm just so built. And I think my genetics were just made for power. I was a sprinter and I was great at it. I just short burst, quick energy. I quit everything because I was bored. I didn't feel like I was being challenged enough. Like, I would do the preseason, and then when it came to competition, I was like, I'm kind of over this. The only thing I stuck with was cheerleading, just because it was fun and I like showing off. But I wouldn't say that there was any one specific thing, because I did softball for quite a long time. And again, that was the sprinting, the power. Yeah. I was a great bunter. So I would steal bases, and I could switch hit from left to right. I'm left-hand dominant, but I could bunt right-handed, and people would get freaked out. And so I wouldn't say that there was one thing. I remember what actually was my introductory into lifting was in gym class. We benched. And as a ninth grader, I benched 95 pounds. And I was the strongest bencher there. And I was just like, okay, this is fun. And I don't have like an incredible story where I'm like, oh, I felt so weak and I wanted to be strong. I was like, no, this is fucking cool and I'm good at it. And it just kind of went from there.
So from there, I went into, I believe bodybuilding was your first endeavor. Is that true?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
It was just the only thing I knew. I wanted a goal. I did bodybuilding and cycling kind of simultaneously. I wanted something that I had to strive for that was more of a long-term goal, that wasn't just you pick pick it up, you do it, and that was it. And
was the cycling just for the cardio base, or was it just?
I had a friend that was doing it, and she's like, "Oh, we do these century ride competitions." So it was like out in this kind of area, like cornfields. You do 50 miles a day for 2 days with the team. And it was just something fun to get into. And it was very expensive, more than I could afford at the time. Because those bikes could be, I remember I got a bike from someone, he bought it for his wife, a $5,000 bike. She rode it once, didn't like it. And I got it for $500.
That's a deal.
Lucked out. And I loved that. And it was more, it was so hard that I wanted to quit the cycling. So I was like, I'm going to keep doing this and push myself, because you're not going to quit this time. And bodybuilding was almost the same. It was so hard that I was like, you have to take this to the end, because you quit everything else because it was too easy and it wasn't a good enough challenge. And I didn't know what powerlifting was. Bodybuilding was very known by almost anyone that lifts weights, understands what the sport of bodybuilding is. I would say it's different now with powerlifting with social media, but back then, and I was never that good at it. The best I placed was second, and there was only 2 of us. And it was a very mentally deteriorous sport to me. I had an eating disorder at the time, and it was not healthy for that. It was not healthy for my self-esteem or my body image. I never had a coach because I couldn't afford one. And I just did what I thought I knew. And I was so green to the whole thing, because I did natural shows. I did my first show was NPC, and then after that I did natural shows. And it wasn't a healthy sport for me, but I felt like I had something to prove. And I feel like that is the sport of bodybuilding, is you always feel like you have something to prove, and when you win, you prove it. And I just never bought into what it took to take that next step. And then I was introduced to powerlifting during that journey.
With the bodybuilding, where were you in your education? Were you in college at the time, or
no? Well, I was in undergrad.
Okay.
Not into PT school at all.
Okay.
And actually, no, my last show, I was in my first year of PT school.
All right.
But still not enough to know anything really. When your first year of PT school is just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah. Well, it took you, I believe, 3 years to get into. So what were you doing between those 3 years of trying to get into? I know there's bartending somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I gotta get some bartending stories. So was that during that gap, or was that throughout all of college?
Yeah, no, it was during that gap. So I did my bachelor's in 3 years. I was like, I'm going to because DPT school is 3 years. You skip your master's and you just get a clinical doctorate. So I was like, I'm going to do this in 6. Boom, done. And fuck me if you're going to tell me different. And I did my bachelor's in 3 years with a double minor. School comes easy. And then when I did my first round of application, I was very disappointed. I had a 3.8 GPA and I didn't get in. And I was like, what the fuck? This isn't medical school. What I hate about the field of physical therapy is they hold it up here in academia as this, you're a doctor. Like we had a white coat ceremony, like a doctoral ceremony, and people think I give fucking massages. And I was like, sure, if you want to pay me $150 an hour, if that's what you think this is, okay. But where the field is and how difficult it is to obtain that degree and what we get paid is such a mismatch, and I hate it. But it doesn't change my love for what I do. So I was doing postgraduate work, just meaning retaking my core classes. My overall GPA was a 3.8, but my core class GPA, which is what they look at to get you into the program, was a 3.2, which wasn't high enough. It needed to be about a 3.6. Yeah. So I was just retaking those classes to try to improve my GPA. And it's super expensive to do classes in that manner where you're not really going towards a degree. And I kept reapplying. I remember the second year I applied to 11 schools. It was $110 per application, plus applying to their own graduate program, which could be $40, could be $100, and essays and volunteer hours and all this stuff. And then I did get into 2 schools that year, one in Missouri and one in Florida. And then I decided I didn't want to move to either of those places, so I didn't go. But I was bartending because that was the only thing that was really enough money worth my time. I was living on my own. I was just really trying to improve that GPA. And then I finally got in on that third try. If I didn't get in that try, I was going to go into physician's assistant program, because I was like, this isn't fucking worth it. I'm wasting all this money. Yeah. I'm 6 years into college and I'm still not at my goal. I'm just starting. So I did get into the program a little bit later than my cohort. There was 36 of us. And I was like 2 years older than everybody because I did the 3 years. I was just a little bit behind, but it took me 6 years to get where it took them only 4.
Yeah. Was the bartending in Cleveland then?
It was in downtown Willoughby, which is like a suburb about 25 minutes outside of Cleveland.
Yeah.
It was like a very happening little half-mile strip of bar to bar to bar to bar to bar. So I would work Friday through Sunday, make about $300-$400 cash a night, work some doubles, and be on my way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you got to the point where, because for years I bounced, so I ran into this little dilemma where I had to get like a real job, and which meant a big pay cut. You know, did you run into that same situation? Because it is all cash. So it's
yeah. No, because I had to kind of trade the opposite. Once I started doing clinicals, I kind of couldn't work.
Okay.
And then I did bartending up until it was time for me to take my test and graduate and become an actual physical therapist. So I was just making enough to just pay my rent, pay my bills. I had a bunch of student loans that I lived off of while I was in school as well to kind of subsidize my income. I graduated with $217,000 in student loan debt. And I paid for 2 years of my undergraduate out of pocket myself because I had money saved.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, for fucking what? Like, you graduate as a PT, you make, here in California, you make the same, which is crazy. You make about 65 to 85 a year, depending where you're at, what setting you're at. When I stopped working for the man and I started working for myself, I was capped out at like $90,000. That's not equitable to how long it takes to get that degree and how much you have to pay to get it. And I went to Cleveland State. I didn't go to a super expensive school.
But then how long it's going to take to pay that all off?
Yeah.
You know, that
I still have 176 left and I'm almost 10 years graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that time period and competing in bodybuilding at that time, where, that's not the question I want to ask. At what point did training become less of a hobby and like something you did for health and more of a passion that this is what because you're competing in bodybuilding. So it's not to the same level when you flipped into powerlifting. Right. I get that. But there's still another flip that happens in there. When did that hit?
I wouldn't say it was until well after I graduated, because if I had, working Friday from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., Saturday working a double, Sunday working a double, I didn't have time on the weekends to do shit. So during the week, if I had a test, if I had an exam, the thing that had to go was training. And I hated it. Or I could get a session in on lunch, 30 minutes, hit some leg press and some bench and go. And I didn't really do many of the big three at that time when I was bodybuilding. Ironically, I was afraid of them all. Yeah. And
well, from a time perspective too,
it
would have been challenging if you only have a half hour or 45 minutes.
Yeah. And luckily, a lot of the girls that were, the field of physical therapy is very active and everybody worked out. So we all got it together. But I took it seriously and I was frustrated that I couldn't give it the time I wanted to at that time, because if I had to prioritize my time to study for an exam, that was the first thing I had to cut, because I couldn't cut work because I needed income.
It's actually a smart decision though.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately.
I mean, for those people that are listening, but I didn't do that. So
well, I knew that the weights would always be there, but this exam would not.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I was super smart in undergrad. I barely even showed up to class. If they didn't have an attendance policy, I would come for the test. But in grad
school, you were one of those people.
Not in grad school, because they try to trick you. They make the questions, you have to synthesize to create your own answer. And I scored the highest. We took an exam that's called a capstone exam. It's a retired physical therapy board test from the previous year that you got to take. And if you didn't pass that, you couldn't graduate. There was 3 people in my class that didn't graduate because they couldn't pass that test. And I felt, could you imagine going all that time and then you don't get to become a physical therapist? I got the highest grade.
Can they retake it?
No, you got 2 opportunities to take it. And if you didn't pass, you could repeat the next year and be in the next class. I believe one person did that. And I know there's 2 people from my class who never became a physical therapist even after graduating. They didn't pass the exam. But I got the highest grade because I read a strategy book on how to take the physical therapy, like the LSAT, whatever, the strategies. And it was like, all of the information you need is in the question, period. There's nothing to synthesize. There's nothing to ascertain that is not there. And because I was tricked into always having to ascertain something that wasn't given to you, it changed my frame of reference in my mind. And I scored the highest. And they thought I cheated because I scored so high. And I was like, no, it's because this is actually how you should take a test. It should be, here's the information and now you find the answer, not fill in the fucking blanks in between of everything we gave you.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh, okay, so this is actually easy. This is how my brain works. This is how it should be. But throughout school, I felt like I had to try more because I felt jaded that a lot of my friends in my cohort lived at home and got the comforts of having the financial support of their parents, of which I didn't. I was one of the only ones who lived alone, worked, and paid my own way for everything, which is okay, but it sucks when you see other people who are like, oh yeah, my mom's paying for this and doing this and my car payment and this and that. And I was like, not me.
Yeah.
So it was always kind of fight or flight a little bit of prioritizing and making sure, I was still young, like 23 or 24 years old, making sure that not only could I pay my bills, do all this, and I'm going for this doctoral program. And if I didn't graduate, I was like, I'm fucked. Like, I have to pass this test because I need to move on with my life.
Do you think you would have had that same drive had the circumstances been different?
No, not at all. No, I think I would have felt the ease and grace of time. And because I was getting older, because the student loans were starting to pile up, because I was living on my own and I knew my lease was up and I wasn't renewing it, because I was a travel physical therapist. So I was like, I have a timeline that I have to hit because you can only take the exam every quarter if you fail. So if I failed my license exam in January, I couldn't take it again for another couple months. And it's like, what are you doing? Your student loans start to kick in and you're just waiting in this limbo area.
Why physical therapy?
When I was 16, my mom was in the snow here. I was washing the dishes and I saw this tuft of snow pass by the window. And I was like, it's not snowing. What the fuck was that? My mom slipped and fell outside and she shattered her ankle. It's called a trimalleolar fracture. So your ankle is a mortise joint where you have the malleoli on either side and then the talus in the middle. She fractured all three. So it's a pretty major surgery where they have to do plates and screws and reconstruct her ankle back together. And I just got my license, so I drove her to physical therapy. And from the first session, I was like, this is what I want to do.
What about it?
I just thought it was so cool that it was a master's degree at that time, but it's a medical intervention that doesn't require medication. And it was like, this person is giving a physical intervention that is helping someone get better in a health and wellness setting. That's not, here's a pill. Mm-hmm. Here's this, because I'm so anti just this world of drugs that we have. Like, oh, you're overweight, here's a pill. Oh, you're this, here's a pill. And it's like, why don't the fuck do you exercise? Why doesn't a doctor just say, you're significantly overweight and that is causing all of your problems, know? Yeah. And I saw that in real life, in real time. And at 16 years old, I was in awe and wonderment that there is this sector of health in the medical community that exists that isn't about a pen and paper prescribing stuff. And I feel like as a 16-year-old, that was so impactful to me that you can make people better by helping them physically.
Mm-hmm. Was your mom compliant?
Yeah. She had a great recovery and never had an issue after that.
Well, the reason I ask that is because I've been through physical therapy centers for injuries that I've had, and it doesn't last very long, right? But I was very often amazed at how many people really didn't give a shit.
That's why I hate outpatient. Yeah. It's just like, because they want something done to them. They want this passive modality where it's like you come in and you get something done to you because that's what people are used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I pushed her to be compliant.
No, that could be.
Yeah.
Definitely can be.
Yeah.
When did powerlifting come into the fold then? That was, your first meet was 2016. I think you prepped for 3 weeks.
Yep.
So were you around powerlifters before that time?
3 weeks prior.
Just 3 weeks prior. Okay. And
so
where was that at?
I was at the gym. It's called Titans in Mentor. Mm-hmm. It was a huge, like 20,000 square foot facility. There was like 5,000 square feet upstairs. And then you walk downstairs and it's just this oasis. They had a whole Strive build out. I remember when I took my husband there for the first time, he was like going nuts because he loved all of the eclectic groups of equipment. They had like 3 different circuits. One was Prime, one was Strive, and one was Lifetime. And then they had a bodybuilding room, posing room. They had a strongman area, and then they had a powerlifting area. And it was very commonplace back then. You probably know everything was locked up because the guys who owned the shit, that was their room. Mm-hmm. So I would always like walk by and I was like, what the fuck is that? And then I saw this guy who I thought was really cute. And I gave him my number and I told him that he needed to call me. And his name was Shane. And he was like, why don't you come train with us? So he invited me in with the crew of guys. And the first workout I did was bench with them. And I think I benched like 185. And I was like, I love this. And it was a conjugate. Yeah. I had no idea where they were just putting on the bands and the chains and telling me what to do. I was like, I love this. And that day I signed up for my first meet 3 weeks later.
Okay. So that explains why you love the bench, because at 95 pounds, the first time you lift weights.
Yeah.
And then you put on what, 90 pounds?
Yeah.
riding a bike,
yeah,
doing bodybuilding shit,
not even trying,
yeah, without really even trying.
Yeah.
What was the first meet?
It was a USAPL. It was called like a winter something. Even Shane, because he was a geared lifter, so he didn't understand the 2-hour weigh-in rules, all the brand affiliate rules that they had at the time. Everything I brought, I couldn't use. Down to my singlet. They let me use my singlet, but I had to borrow knee sleeves and other stuff to wear on the platform. I benched and squatted the same, 176 pounds at the meet. I had the biggest bench at the meet, which is pretty crazy for my first one. And I think I deadlifted 303. I almost bombed out because I didn't listen to the squat commands. I was just so green with the whole thing. I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember there was a female there that deadlifted 402. And that's when I was like, this is my sport. I hated bodybuilding in that if you came in first, you came in last, you kind of don't know why.
Yeah.
You just did. And powerlifting, I was like, oh, you either fucking did this or you didn't, period. And I loved that hard line, not subjective anymore. There's more objective nature to the sport. And I loved that there was a rising bar goal, that it's like, oh, your quad is bigger than mine. It's like, no, I fucking lifted more than you. And it's just this measurable substantiation that you can keep growing. And that's when I knew that this was where my heart sang.
How many women were in the meet when you did that one?
Not a lot, maybe 10. It was a 2-platform meet. It was a big meet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just like in like a gym. It was very low budget, low production. There was a banner, and I have some very low quality videos from that meet. But I just remember feeling, I can't wait to do this again. And I never felt that with bodybuilding. Bodybuilding was just, I need a goal. I need something that's going to drive me to keep getting better. And then, after that, it just kept I never stopped.
How long was it until you did your next meet then?
The next 2 meets are not in open powerlifting. It's a federation called NASA, Natural Athlete Strength Association, that is based in Arizona. And maybe it was like a year, because I think with PT and everything, because I started traveling, and I found a group of powerlifters when I was out in Arizona for my first job, and they kind of took me under their wing because I still kind of had no idea what I was doing. And there was this guy named Mike, older gentleman in his 50s who had been doing it for a really long time, and he kind of had a crew of guys, and I just hopped in with them, and I did 2 NASA meets in a row, maybe within 4 months of each other.
How did you find that crew?
Just at the gym. I'm not shy, and I'm just like, hey, you guys are powerlifting? Can I join?
Yeah.
Like I'm not shy to approach people or.
So at that time, it wasn't hard to find powerlifting crews?
I'm surprised I did, because I was in Bullhead City, Arizona, which is by Laughlin, Nevada. I don't know if you know there. It's like basically like a retirement community. They call it like old Vegas almost, because it's old people. And it's like an hour away from Las Vegas. And I had 2 different gyms, one that had more accessory equipment and one that had more strength equipment that I would go to in the same city. And they were just there one day, and I just jumped on in.
So work took you there?
Yeah.
And that was
my first job.
Was that the traveling physical therapy, or was that straight in a hospital or rehab center?
It was in hospital. So traveling physical therapy is just like travel nursing, where you take a 3-month contract.
Yeah.
And you can either be picky about the setting that you're in, like hospital, skilled nursing, outpatient, or the location. And since it was my first job, I was like, I want to go to Arizona. I don't care what setting it is. Just get me a job. It's my first one. And me and my friend traveled together. So she got a job at the skilled nursing facility, and I got a job at the hospital.
So were you there for 3 months and then out? So where did you go after that?
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay. And were you still able to find a powerlifting crew everywhere that you went?
Yeah.
All right.
I just started looking at powerlifting gyms at that point, and then I started becoming that person that I'm going to drive 45 minutes to go here and an hour to go there. And it just was the chase of my life, where nothing else felt the same in the gym anymore. Nothing else hit the same.
Now, from the physical therapy side of this, when you were moving to these different places, at what point did it start to register in your brain that there's parts of this that you don't like?
Physical therapy? I wouldn't say I felt that yet, because traveling, you make a fuck ton of money. Like I was making sometimes $3,000 a week, and it was awesome. Granted, when you have any time off, you don't get paid, so it ends up evening out over time. But there was aspects about the medical model and the insurance-based care that I didn't like, where they were forcing you to have this productivity level that was unreasonable. For example, I was at a place where I did the math. If I have 6 minutes of time where I'm not working, I'm unproductive. So if I go to the bathroom twice, I need to take a text or a phone call or whatever, I'm not meeting my goal for that day. And I base myself on a code of ethics that I have a very hard line with. And if you're forcing me to do something that I feel is unethical, I'm just going to say, go fuck yourself, fire me, fine. Like this is unreasonable. Like if, if a nurse needs help or if someone fell on the floor, I'm not acting as a physical therapist. That's not billable. I'm helping care for a person. Yeah. But that's not a return for the hospital or for the, facility that I'm working at. And I never got in trouble for it, but I would just tell them how I felt. And I would never say that there was a point where I just didn't like it, because the working for myself kind of came out of necessity with what happened with our life, with opening the gym and everything like that. Yeah. So I always loved it.
Where I'm wondering, I guess where this is coming from is when I would have surgery or whatever I fucked up at the time, I'd end up in a physical therapy setting, and I had people I was speaking to on the phone that knew what they were doing. Michael Hope was one that, I don't know if he had his doctorate or not, but he would advise me because there's stupid shit that I do. So how to rein in my stupid shit. But then when I would go for whatever I was supposed to do pre that, there was like shady shit where, say I'm there for my back or whatever it was. So they're doing work for my back, but then I just strain my pec like the week before. They can't do shit for that. But if I'm there for low back, they're billing, cervical spine, thoracic spine, and a little bit. So they're already billing 2 other things that I'm not even there for. Yeah. But they're not going to do anything for the pec. And I'm like, basically all I did was I kind of vetted out these different places post major injury to find somebody that hopefully I could build a relationship with. And then over a period of years, private pay became a thing. So thank God, because then when they leave, we don't have to deal with that. Right. And if you don't have money, it sucks, right? Yeah. Because insurance isn't going to cover it, but you're getting way better care.
That's where I'm at, because it's the only thing that makes sense. I would say because I wasn't really with outpatient, I was with low-level geriatrics in almost all of the settings I was in. I didn't run into that too much. It was more, we want you to do 90 minutes of care for someone who's in a coma. And I was like, no. Like, what am I going to do? Sing her a song read her a story? Like, she's in so you do passive range of motion and positioning, but that 15, 20 minutes at the most. And I wouldn't bill any more than that because it wasn't ethical, and they would get upset. And I mean, they wouldn't fire me. They just wouldn't extend my contract or invite me back. Yeah. And I'm fine with that. What was the end for me with doing those kind of jobs was they wanted me to evaluate someone who was dying. Like, I walked into this room, they were like, stat eval, go, room 303 right now. You have to go do it. He was blue. I put oxygen saturation on his finger. It was 67. And I'm like screaming, code blue, code blue, code blue. And I was just so upset that no one was like, this person is not medically stable, and they're yelling at me to go get my evaluation and so we can get some billable units. And then the man died. That same facility, someone was on the floor screaming, help, help, help. And I was in a room a few doors down, but I was donned with all of this gear because someone had a staph infection, and you have to take everything off to walk out and put everything back on to walk in. So after like a minute, I'm just like, okay, someone needs to fucking help this lady. So I take off all my stuff. I go, she's on the floor. I help her up back into bed. There's workers eating 10 feet from her through a screen door that they can hear her. And I was like, what the fuck were you guys doing? And they're like, oh, she screams all the time. I was like, I can't be here. And I had this burden of guilt because I quit that job after those two things happened in the same week. I felt this burden of guilt because I'm leaving, but these people are still here. And it hurt my heart that these people are so overworked, underpaid, and overstressed because they have too many patients that they stop giving a fuck about human beings. And I kind of have to let that go because it's always going to be that way, but I just couldn't be in that environment anymore. And then I was like, I want to look for jobs that are a little bit more ethical. I needed to get out of skilled nursing facilities. So I stayed with acute care after that, which is in the hospital setting after surgery, getting someone up after a hip, after a knee, or someone who's been in bed for a while. That was I chose the billing. I got to choose the time. Nothing was dictated for me.
Was it, at that time, was it challenging your education though?
To be in that setting?
Yeah, working with those people.
Not really, because I'm just a professional glorified people walker.
Mm-hmm. That's what kind of was getting at.
So with travel therapy, you kind of take the lesser of two evils of I'm doing a lower level, but actually you get paid the most in the lowest level of care. Outpatient, which uses the most amount of skills, you get paid the least, which I think is fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, trading. I want this traveling lifestyle where I'm going from place to place. I told myself I was going to travel until I found a place or a setting that I really fell in love with.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because I think the glorious thing about the role of a physical therapist is you can work, unlike a chiro, you work outpatient. Like we can work in a hospital, we can work outpatient. We can do so many different applications to our role that I think is just wonderful. And where I ended up landing was in neuro, working with people who had strokes, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries. And I did that for 2 years and it was awesome. It was so challenging.
And where was that at?
That was in a hospital called Little Company of Mary in San Pedro. So I had met my husband and I was going to Northern California, but I decided to go to Southern California instead. And then I just never left.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so getting back to the powerlifting, was it the 2019 Kern?
Mm-hmm.
Your first big platform, I guess.
2018
Kern.
Yeah, it was the year we opened the gym.
Yes. All right. So how did that come to be?
I kind of got an in, not deserving of the in. Gracie was my coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like super last minute, but she did invite me and I didn't necessarily qualify. And then that's when you asked like what flipped? That's what flipped.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I got invited to the biggest stage that there was at the time in powerlifting, I was like, holy fuck, I need to step up my game. I need to take this serious. And we were opening the gym. We opened Southbay Strength Company in March of 2018. So I was doing prep for the biggest meet of my life simultaneously while opening our first business.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I did my first cycle as well, because I was like, I need to level up on every single playing field that I can. I didn't have the best performance at the Kern, but it opened my eyes to what I wanted my powerlifting career to look like.
Now, what were your lifts before that? Because if that's when you started your first cycle, just for reference for anybody that's listening, like where was your dots at that time? What were your lifts at that time?
I'd have to look it up.
I might have.
I want to say that I was around, I already had some big bench records. I want to say my squat was around 325. My bench was around 264 and my deadlift. I had done 400 in the gym, but in a meet, I want to say it was only around 365.
I got 374.8, 235, and 374. So you squatted and deadlifted the same again.
Oh man, I gave more credit to my bench than I deserved. 235.
Yeah. All right. So was that pivot while you were training for that, or was it after that?
While I was training for it.
Okay.
I had this mental shift that I don't think I ever took any sport as seriously as I did that moment when I knew I got invited to do it. I felt so honored, and I was always a great athlete, but I never did anything. I never went to states or whatever in high school or college. I never was a collegiate athlete at all. So I had never had that experience where it was like, there's so much on the line for how much this means to me until that moment. And that's when I was like, I want this to feel as rewarding as it feels to be invited to do it.
Did you do a deep dive into the training methodologies and such, because you have this base of physical therapy, so it'd be a little easier to understand how that lays out? Or did you just rely on Gracie or whoever you were working with?
I just relied on Gracie. She was my first serious coach. I met her at USPA Worlds. I had coaches before, but never really hands-on. It was more like, here's your program.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I still feel like I was so green for how much I knew about the body and movement and stuff. As far as powerlifting goes, they didn't connect yet at all. I was just like, I'm just doing this cool thing. And I saw Gracie handling Susan Salazar at IPL Worlds. And I was like, this is awesome. And she kind of like took me, you know how you collect powerlifters when you're a coach. And she kind of took me under my wing and helped me a little bit. And I saw people have pneumonia for the first time. And I was just like, this is so cool. And then I became her athlete for maybe about a year and a half before she invited me. And it was conjugate based training, which I had done and dabbled conjugate the entire time, except when I was traveling, it was difficult. So I did a little bit more. I did some Lane Norton programs and it was just easier because I had commercial gym access for some of the time, depending on where I was. And it was great to have a team because even though it wasn't individualized programming, she had the pack, which had like a Facebook group, and I met friends, and, you know, I would go down to her gym and see people that it was my first time experiencing the community of powerlifting coming onto the DCS pack with Gracie. And although Gracie and I have had our up or downs, we're okay now. And, so it was after the Kern though that I left her as an athlete because I was like, I need something more. If I want to take this to where I think I want to take this, I need an individualized coaching program. And then I went with Callous Hands, Lonis Green. And we were together I was his last athlete ever because he retired and he just kept me on.
Yeah.
And we stopped last December. So we were together for 4 years.
So when working with him, what did that relationship look like? Because we'll talk about coaching and athlete relationships later, but just with him, because you can offer insight to him and back. Was there that back and forth?
Yeah, it was the first time I got a video explaining like, this is what you need to do with your lats in the squat. And I was like, oh, I never had anyone focus on me as an athlete. I just always had people giving me a program. I never had in-person coaching. I never had that one-on-one experience where someone was telling me, these are your deficits, and this is the plan we're going to have to address them and to work on them.
Did that start to click in your brain though, the physical therapy side?
Yes. Then I started seeing and feeling things. And so it was like 2019. And also I think probably in any field, unless it's like a skill that you learn, like welding, it takes a couple of years for you to get good at your trade and your skill. And I feel like the first 2 years of physical therapy, I was kind of fumble fucking my way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I learned this in school, I think, but it's not till you get that real life application where you see the scenarios and how they can play out, of which you get better. And I apologize to I didn't fuck anybody up, but anybody that they didn't get the best treatment of, you know, where my skill set is now. And it was the first time where I was like, oh, I also have this enhanced background and knowledge that I can use. So aside from this shoulder surgery, I've never had any injuries at all. I had a minor disc herniation that lasted maybe a month, and I was able to rehab myself, and it's never been an issue again. I had a 3 millimeter in my L4, L5.
Yeah, so after the Kern, you kind of had an upward trajectory, right?
Yeah.
And how often were you, I don't want to pull it back out again because I'm lazy, but how often were you competing at that point?
About twice a year.
Okay.
There was like 2 years where I did 3 times in the same year. I did a lot of expos because expos at that time were all qualifiers, and I just wanted to keep competing on a big stage. I wanted someone else to be pushing me. Like, oh, this girl's competing. I love stalking my competition. It's my favorite thing to do. Like, oh, she just did this. Like, I need to do that. And it would just, that excitement, that fire lighting under my ass is what I felt like I needed. And I didn't feel like I could get that same fulfillment out of just doing a local meet, which is funny because now I feel the opposite.
There's a topic for later. Well, as you were on that trajectory, it's how many years? Like 2-3 years?
Yeah.
Okay. What setbacks occurred during those times? Or was it just like, I'm on this roll and I'm just killing shit left and right?
I would say it was about 3.5 years. For the most part, I was on this roll and I was killing shit where almost every meet I got better and better and better. The thing that I struggled with the most, and still is an issue for me personally, is the water cut, the weight cut. I just don't do well with it. It tanks my fucking performance every time. And I just couldn't accept that I needed to just keep cutting. So when I got invited to do Boss of Bosses, which I earned that spot, I dieted hard. I was like, I'm not going to do any water cut. I am going to meet my weight. And I got cut down to like 12% body fat. And then I did a DEXA scan and I was like, oh, holy shit, I'm huge. Like I can't be in this weight class anymore. That was my last time as a 148. And I did okay in my competition. But that was a wake up call to, I need to reevaluate and readdress how I'm doing I was so focused on the training. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to focus more on the nutrition aspect as I'm leading into a meet so that I have a smaller window that I have to achieve where I'm not going to cut down to my weight class. It's only going to be like 3 or 4 pounds because that's all I can tolerate.
Yeah. Now, during those years, was your training in powerlifting, I'm not it's hard to define priorities, right? Because you got to balance a lot of different shit. But would you say most of the time powerlifting was the top of your list?
Yeah, I think it was easy because I own a gym. So it's my hobby and my passion and my profession are all in the same place.
Yeah.
And we literally, my husband and I built our lives around our sports.
Yes.
We opened a powerlifting and bodybuilding gym only out of necessity because there wasn't one in our area. And we were driving and we had 4 different gym memberships and it was exhausting. And I would say that it was a huge priority, but also I have the ability to turn it off because I do realize it's just fucking powerlifting. Like it is still a hobby that's not, I'm not a professional, although I call myself a professional athlete, I'm not getting paid to do this. That's a meaningful salary to cover my, my lifestyle. But also I need to be a good representative of this sport because it's my life. I am the brand of Southbay Strength Company. So I need to be, I want to be the strongest one in the room. But also I think because I have my profession of physical therapy, I do the push and flow, the ebb and flow of, because I love teaching and educating with my knowledge so much that I don't feel like my whole life's identity rides on being a powerlifter. Yeah,
no, I get that. But there's from that first kern to the next stretch, you still may be in it. There's the discipline that's required. I think people underestimate.
Oh yeah, my whole life revolves around the sport.
Yeah, the discipline, the consistency, and all the other thing. That's not to say that there's not inherent balance, because if you don't have that, then you can't pay to do the thing that you want to do, which is the powerlifting. But sometimes I think that aspiring lifters, and I don't want them to fuck their lives up, we're not saying that, they very, very much underestimate the discipline, the consistency, and all the little things that have to be done to be able to get there and then stay there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only traveling I've done since 2018 outside of 2 elected vacations were for competitions. In the past 5 years. That's it. Like we travel to go to meet and then maybe we dovetail a little bit of vacation after, like stay a couple days extra. But it is total, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Those are my training days, period. And there's no flexibility in it. So.
Yeah. Well, you touched on an important thing though, too, because you built your social life around the gym.
Yes.
So you don't need to go to a bar or wherever to hang out with friends. They're there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very convenient, and it's nice that every aspect of my world is around fitness. So it makes it hard to have any other option when maybe you're feeling like you want something different. It's like, well, this is your life all the time. So it just makes it that much easier to focus on it. Yeah.
And then your profession's also under that umbrella. So everything falls under that umbrella.
It's all one and the same. And I was coaching, and everything is all one and the same. Makes it hard to have a moment where you fall off because you can't.
What year did you first start the gym?
2018.
2018. And what you kind of touched on that decision of you couldn't find anywhere else to train and there was 4 different places you guys were going to. What else played into that?
So it was my husband's idea, 100%. He's like, we should start a gym. We should start a gym. Like just poking at me. Because he was a grand master of ideas and excitement. He had wonderful ideas, but no means to get there, to bridge the gap from here's my idea, physical. It was just, this is an idea. And we were on our honeymoon when I finally agreed, like, fucking fine. Because we would drive, so we would both work. And I'm sure so many people listening have the same experience. You go home, you let your dogs out, you go to the gym for 3 to 5 hours, then your dogs are home. Like we are dog lovers, 13, 14 hours, and it sucks for them. And he also, with being a bodybuilder and me being a powerlifter, the necessity of having 4 gyms was all for me, because commercial benches have either, 4-inch J cups or 12-inch J cups. And, this gym had hex plates, and this gym, I had a suitcase that I would bring my chains in, and we bought our own SSB bar, and we would bring it in we asked, and the one gym would let us, we would carry it in and carry it out because we didn't want anybody to fuck it up.
Yeah.
And he finally was like, let's just do it. We'll just start small. Like his idea was to do it in a storage unit and have it be a co-op where, 20 people pay us and everybody gets a key. And I was like, no, we're going to do this right if we're going to do it. So we had a trip planned to Greece about 3 months after we came back from our honeymoon, which was planned before our honeymoon because we got not married on a whim, but we got engaged and married very quickly. And so we decided not to go on that trip.
You can't just skip over that, right? So talk to me a little bit about this Vegas marriage thing.
So we met in Vegas at a pool party. His friend came up to me and he's like, hey, you're buff. My friend, he's buff. You should go talk to him. And that's literally how I met my husband. And we didn't get married that weekend, but we dated long distance for about 4 months. And then I decided that I was coming here. Well, my job actually ended early. They cut my contract early, which is a thing that can happen in travel. So I came to California. You have to get your license in every state. I already got my license for here, but I was going to go up to like Sacramento, San Jose. And it was in November and it was cold. So I was like, I'm going to go to Southern California instead. And I was like, fuck it. I'm going to live with this guy and see how it goes. And if I hate it, I can just go travel somewhere else. And then, so that was 4 months in. At 6 months in, we went on our first vacation together. We spent $6,000 on this huge all-inclusive trip to Punta Cana, and he proposed to me there. And then 1 year later, we were going to get married in Jamaica, just on the beach. We didn't plan it. We just got an all-inclusive resort, and we were like, we'll just show up at a gazebo. Because I was married before when I was 24. I got married and divorced in PT school, and that was very difficult. But it was like, I didn't love the guy. It was just, that's what you do in Ohio. You're together for 3 years, then you get married.
You're not wrong.
That's all my friends. No offense. Most of them are all happy married. But I was just like, we were together for 3 years, so you get married. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And then that's actually why I decided to travel. Because I was like, I want to get out of this environment where everybody just settles down and does nothing. I want excitement and adventure. And so we were getting married on New Year's Eve in Jamaica. And the United States consulate was closed that week. So we couldn't do the actual marriage certificate there. So I was like, okay, we can get married at the courthouse in downtown LA. It's on Fridays between 1 and 4 by appointment only. We have 5 Fridays until we go. This sucks. He was a union plumber, so he worked on high rises. I was like, I don't want to have to call off work, take a half a day, meet you downtown in your shitty construction clothes, literally, and us get married at the courthouse. I was like, we're going to Vegas for Worlds. When I met Gracie that time, I was like, why don't we just do it there anyways? He's like, no, I don't want to do it. When we get there, I'm like, please, let's just do it here. No, I don't want to do it. Please, let's just do it. Okay, fine. I'm going to say some non-PC words. Only if it's by a midget and only if he's dressed like Elvis. And I was like, all right, we got 6 options.
Oh my.
It was so easy. Oh my gosh, you can get married by anything and anyone in Vegas. And it is a 2-step process. You can't just walk in and get married. In old Vegas, they have it's like a DMV of marriage licenses. Like you walk in and you take a number and you're in the waiting carousel and they call your number and you fill out the paperwork. And then when you walk out, they have all these people with pamphlets like, get married by Tina Turner, get married by Michael Jackson. So we already had booked our Elvis marriage for the next day. It was $550 and it included 4 Polaroids. Of which I have still on the wall. And he was
wow, that's the ups.
I know, that's the upsells. I think it was $50 extra for the Polaroids because you couldn't bring in any photography at all. Our friends still so he was Russian and he had our name on Post-it notes. And he was like, he walked me down the aisle singing Fools Fall in Love. It was awesome. We were dying laughing the whole time. And he's like, okay, do you, Steven, I take her this a lady, Ashley, do you promise to love her tender? And it was awesome. So that was our marriage Vegas story. And he was just the best partner ever.
Yeah.
And but he was really good at pushing me to utilize all of my skills that I have. And he saw in me things that I couldn't see in me as far as what I could accomplish. And he knew that I could do this gym. So when we got back from our honeymoon, which we went from Jamaica to Cuba, and from the time we planned it to the time we went, it became illegal to go there, but it was still okay. And so when we came back, we had that Greece trip planned. He went to work. I stayed off. And within 3 months, we were brick and mortar opened in our first facility, which was 1,300 square feet. It was about 1,000 square feet of floor space. We took out a $50,000 equipment loan, which we bought from Williams Strength and Speed. And it was half that and half used. And Southbay Strength Company was born. It was very small. We weren't sure if anyone was going to show up, but we budgeted it so that even if it failed and no one came, we had the sickest private gym ever that we could afford with our salaries. I think the total overhead for that was about $5,000 a month. And it became wildly successful to the point where we grew over the course of the 5 years we've been open.
Well, I think that's there's a key key takeaway in what you just said is even if it failed, it still became your own.
Yeah.
It was affordable.
Yeah.
And without anybody.
Yeah.
You know, so then anybody that comes in is just a plus.
Yeah. And that's a lot of, I mean, I mentor people. I do one-on-one. I'm like, take all my shortcuts that I learned, pay me to learn how to do it easier. And people ask like, you know, well, isn't it scary? You know, and that's why I think we knew that no matter what, we couldn't fail because we had a 3-year lease and we were like, it would be pushing our budget to the max. But literally, if no one showed up, we could still afford this on our own. And that's fine. And that's why we felt safe in making the jump to do it.
At what point did you go from working in the hospital to working with patients, clients in the gym?
So it wasn't even in the gym because the first gym, it didn't have an office. It didn't have anything. It was 20 feet wide by 120 feet long. We had a cable machine that we had to disassemble because it didn't fit lengthwise or widthwise in the gym. It was 2020. It was during COVID. The gym, it was beginning of 2020. It was before COVID hit. It was just demanding more of my time than I could even do, you know, working full time, texting people. And I was coaching about 20 athletes, which that I didn't want to do. People just kept asking me to coach and I was so good at it that I just kind of took one and then another and then it just kept growing. And I was realizing I was too distracted to fully participate full time in a real job. So I tried to get a part-time job somewhere else and that lasted about 3 weeks. Because I just felt so nervous of losing the security of a guaranteed income. So I just took the jump because I knew that like I needed to manage all of the aspects of the business as it was growing because it was kind of slipping away from me, whether it was work I wasn't paying attention to enough or the aspects of the business or falling behind on this, that, or the other. Because when we first opened, like I did our QuickBooks, I did everything because I wanted to learn how to do it. So if I pass it off to someone else, I could see if someone was fucking me over or stealing or doing it wrong. And I think that's super important to know all of the aspects of your business.
Yes.
And then I was doing physical therapy out of our house. We had 2 bedrooms and we had a second bedroom so it was friends, family, and referrals. I didn't really advertise it because I didn't want to know where people knew where I lived. And we had dogs and a cat. And a lot of people are allergic to cats. And then we knew we wanted to leave that space when the 3-year lease was up regardless. And the gym was successful enough that we knew we wanted to this was the jump that if it failed, we were fucked. And we made it anyways. And we went from that 1,300 square feet to 8,000 square feet, grocery store, shopping center, key tenant in the middle. And we moved during COVID. We actually had a bump in memberships during COVID because all the big box commercial gyms were closed because they have a more watchful eye from the government, especially in LA. It was crazy. Yeah. But so people were coming to us because they just don't want to fucking work out. And it was really hard to get all the sign-offs done because of COVID. So it took about 9 months for that facility to open. And we were just in this limbo period where we were paying month-to-month rent in our old place while waiting for the new place to open. But the moment it opened, it was like, wow.
There's kind of a reoccurring theme that I'm seeing through your story here. And that is, if this doesn't work out, I'm fucked. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I know you're not strategically putting yourself in those positions, but do you thrive in those positions?
Yes. I never, ever thought failure was an option. Someone asked me that the other day, and I was like, I was never nervous to fail. All of the times that so much was riding on it, like my financial livelihood or us failing with this gym that costs $20,000 a month now, I never was nervous that we were going to fail because I trusted us so much. I trusted myself so much, which is a good and a bad thing because I'm always taking on a lot of responsibility because I know I can count on myself. But that pressure, I make diamonds. I feel like I need that.
Well, I think that's a good thing because it forces you to find solutions instead of just bitch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because the people that are on the other end of that just bitch. And bitch and bitch and bitch.
Or they just throw their hands up and they're like, I can't do this. I can't take it. Or they want someone to bail them out or to help. And I would be online at 3 a.m. researching and doing things of how can I make this work? And I love that about life, that you can take something and Rubik's Cube it and figure it out to make it work. And I think that's the coolest thing because really you can do anything that you want. I never thought I was going to be a business owner. I never wanted to be a business owner. I never wanted that responsibility. And here I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you moved over into the new place, and how long did it take for that to become break even? Because I'm sure your rent.
No, we were profitable even in the first gym from year 1.
Yeah.
when we moved, we had enough members that I knew we were break even.
Okay.
It was literally zero sum game.
Yeah.
We had 200 members when we moved, and it was just enough to pay all of the bills. So I was like, okay, as long as no one cancels, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still coaching, and he had stopped working because there was no work from COVID. And then the plan was for him to go back to work because his salary was substantial and it had great benefits and insurance because of the union. But after a few months in the gym and we realized, oh, wow, we made something pretty incredible here. I was like, you can be a kept man. You don't have to go back to work. You're fine.
Mm-hmm. During that, is that when you moved your practice into the gym?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, I was just treating out of my spare bedroom, and then we created a 600 square foot clinic into the gym. So it's its own closed door private practice. It doesn't have a front office or anything like that, but I have 3 treatment bays. So I have myself, and then I have different massage therapists who come in. I would love to have a chiropractor or another physical therapist in, but I found that it's pretty hard for these industries for people to want to do cash pay because they don't trust themselves enough to build up enough clientele. They want to be fed clients.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you pay me rent and you bring your own clients. There's no restrictions. But a lot of people don't have that either faith or skill set within themselves to create their own brand and get their own clientele in there.
How do you manage your schedule then? Because you still have the gym shit you do.
At first, very poorly.
Well, explain that. What do you mean very poorly? Like, what did it look like at first where you knew you had to change?
Oh, you want to get treated at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday? Sure. Oh, you want to get treated at Saturday at 10 a.m.? Sure. Oh, you want to, right before I train? Okay.
Got it.
I was just taking anyone and everyone because I was like, money. And then I was like, fuck, I am so burnt out. And I had 50 coaching athletes remote. And I am the kind of person where I'm like, if you're paying me $150 a month, you're getting $150 a month worth of my time, my energy, and my service. And then I rapidly decreased it to 20 and then a 10. And I was like, I can't coach anymore at all. It just didn't fit in with this dynamic. I was very stressed out. I would say the first 6 to 8 months because I was taking on way too much responsibility, but I felt like I can do it all.
Yeah.
And I was like, bitch, and I can't. And I had to kind of cut my losses and evaluate what was the most important to me. And then I created a PT schedule and I got a scheduler because I was creating and keeping all my own appointments in my calendar on my phone. Every morning, waking up, texting people, your appointment today is at 3 p.m. Your appointment tomorrow is at 2 p.m., like a daily reminder and a next day reminder. And then I was like, wait, this is like 2020. There's apps that can do this. So I found a scheduler that just people book themselves. It gave them their own reminder. It's like my own little personal assistant, but it just does it for it automatically. And I could create rules where it synced with my own personal calendar. So if I blocked up personal time, I could create rules for when my appointments were available. And then I just decided that no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And I needed to create a boundary for myself because I care so much about people, and 90% of my clients are athletes. So I wanted to fix, like, your shoulder's fucked up. Yes, I want you to be able to bench. You have a meet in 2 weeks. And I wanted people to feel well, and I knew I'm really good at what I do. But I had to be like, people can wait, or people can take off work and come see me at 11 instead of like any doctor's appointment. So creating that house of boundaries for myself changed everything, where I became, because I was even stressed to train. Like I was like squeezing it in for a minute. And then I was like, okay, like I can do this, and we're making enough money where I don't need to be spreading myself so thin.
Well, the tricky thing with the online training, and you kind of touched on that, is you noted that if they're paying you $150 a month, then they're going to get $150 of your service for that month. This is kind of where I think that whole model's broke, because you probably charge more than that for an hour for somebody to come see you for the training therapy or
and
whatever.
It's way more than hours worth of work.
Way more, right? So then it's like, if it's how do you, there's where this whole online thing's kind of broke for people who really know their shit, because what does that equate to? Like 20 minutes a week, for that actual value of that time that can be reallocated in different areas.
Right.
So what you essentially did was just cut it from 50 down to 20, because the return on your time's higher with the in-person, which makes sense, where, the online thing just ends up being filled, by somebody that's competed for a year or never competed.
Well, they were all still virtual.
Yeah.
And that was difficult because a lot of them were members of my gym. And I had to be like, this isn't this isn't personal training. This isn't, I don't get to watch your squat right now. You send me the video. But what I would do is I would do video feedback. So I would watch someone's video and then I would record a video explaining what they did, what they didn't do. I would do sometimes picture in picture. I would send them screenshots. It was laborious. And then I went to text feedback, and then I went to rolling feedback. Instead of you check in on a day and you get feedback, you know, the next day, it's you check in on Saturday and I do it throughout the week. And I just felt like I was kind of watering down my product. And this is where I texted you between educator and coach. I fucking love teaching people how to do it right. Or I have an eye that can see things that no one can. Like, oh, your symmetry on your foot. Like I can tell that you're pronating on your right foot. So you're shifting in the hole. You might have a leg length issue, like weird, crazy things that not the normal untrained eye cannot. And it hurt me to not be able to do that. But I knew that I wanted to be an educator more than a coach. So I still do seminars and clinics, and I do one-on-one sessions with people where they pay me for just 1 hour of my time to either go over a movement or to teach them a movement. And I would love to coach again, but it's just not worth my time. Unfortunately. And I hate saying that because it feels pompous, but it's not. There's not an amount of money that I could charge that would be equitable to the amount that I need to give to do it.
No, and I think people understand that. You know, I just think that model, you know, that originally started just because of, my theory is it originally started with lifters that just needed some way to pay for their test, you know, to be able to get ready for a meet. So then that's what they did. And that's about how much effort they put into that. But over time, that's become some people's professions. For sure. You know, so then as that scales, the actually quality of the product decreases as it scales instead of increases, because just the way the model kind of is, where the in-person's got, I mean, you have people that travel, you know, to see you, you know, so their cost is more than what you charge per hour. They got to get there. Yeah.
I had someone fly from Sacramento to come see me for PT. I still charged her. I felt bad, but it's like, you get what you pay for, you know, if you need it that bad. And I have people who complain about their online coaches with the amount of feedback they're getting or the time they feel like they're getting. I'm like, you're employing them. Like, kind of, you're their boss. Like, you're paying their salary. And if you're not happy with the product or the quality that you're getting, I don't know why there's this differential of a power dynamic. It's greater in bodybuilding than it is in powerlifting, where when you have a coach, you're afraid to tell them, like, I'm unhappy with the service that you're providing that I'm paying for. And I don't understand why it's like that. Maybe it's a respect thing that you respect your coach so much you don't want to say that. But I have a lot of people who come to me in confidence and complain about this coach or that coach that, you know, they didn't get back to me for 4 days. And it's like, well, what is the agreement that you went into? How much are you paying? Do you feel like you're getting a value for what you're paying for? And a lot of times it's a no, because it's just not the same as in person, no matter how you swing it. It's so difficult because you're missing that connection. Yeah.
I need to use the restroom, so we're going to take a break real quick.
Sure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drank 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is, if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/Table Talk. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to EliteFTS.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
Matt with EliteFTS here at the Armory in Columbus, Ohio. This is a new build, beautiful facility. Should be opening up around November 1st. 1st, 2023. Looking at the posterior chain developer, signature version. It's going to have the logo panels on there. Reverse hypers, you can do glute ham raises, back raise, any kind of posterior chain movement you want to do on this piece. This is really good. The best thing about this, so you just step down on the release, adjust it. So it makes it really easy to adjust these, no pop pins or anything of those sorts. So this is the signature posterior chain developer by EliteFTS.com.
Before we started the podcast, and one of the messages that you sent me was about the average longevity of a powerlifter. I don't want to necessarily get into that, but I want to go back a couple years in your career. So if we go back 2 years ago, how were you laying out what your powerlifting career was going to look like, and what did you perceive as being after that?
I think about 2 years ago was the first time I felt the risk of my career being taken away from me from like bumps and bruises and a little bit of injuries. And also my eyes were opened up to severe injuries. I was doing a meet. It was 2019, but that was a while ago. Susan Salazar had her quad rupture on the platform right before I was going next to her. And I heard this is the loudest fucking snap I've ever heard in my life. Sorry, Susan. And I know it took her a lot to mentally get over that, and she's back in the sport. But I was like, wow, like people get fucked up. And I never, the bigger the meet you go, the larger the injuries, because the higher the risk, the heavier the weight. I don't think I had like an overarching thought of how am I going to set myself up for success and longevity? Because anytime something had happened, I kind of just was able to PT my way out of it. And I never had any nagging or lingering or anything like that. I did injure my shoulder in 2013 doing CrossFit, which is the worst sport ever for longevity, because add, competition time and fatigue, intensity with a competitive nature, and it's a recipe for disaster. I had a grade 2 tear of my supraspinatus tendon, which is one of the rotator cuff muscles, for those who don't know. And it always was just never the same. I rehabbed it traditionally. I didn't need surgery. And it took about 6 years, even for lateral raise, to feel the same after like 6 reps. Like I could feel this one fatiguing, even though it's my dominant shoulder. So with how heavy of a bencher I was, I hit the 300-pound mark in 2020. So for 3 years, benching that amount of weight, and even before that in the high 200s, I started to feel like here and there it would flare up. And I was like, okay, like I need to maybe start doing more rehab. Because although I'm a physical therapist, my warm up is for deadlift, it's nothing. For squat and bench, it's very minimal, because I believe that people get into this ritualized performance as opposed to doing what's necessary. Like I see people warming up for 45 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, unless you really need that, like, or the mobility where I think mobility is so hyper sensationalized. I'm like, can you wipe your ass? Can you tie your shoe? What the fuck do you need to be doing that for? And I guess, personal preference, but I was like, okay, I might need to start actually taking my warm-ups a little bit more seriously, not for mobility purposes, but for addressing minor deficits. And around that time is when I kind of started feeling like Lonis and my relationship was going great. And he was still that one-on-one coach that I never had. But I started to feel hungry for a little bit more. Like, what if someone could do a little more? Like, give me specific warm-up, give me specific prehab, rehab that maybe I'm not seeing within myself, even as a physical therapist. It's hard to self-diagnose deficits.
Yeah.
And that's why I never liked coaching myself, because I don't see the same things that I'm doing wrong as I can see in someone else. I don't know if I answered your question fully.
Kinda. Right. So you started to have the injuries, but was there a point where, so if it's 2021, are you thinking I can do this at this level for 3 or 4 more years, then move on to something else? Or was it, no, I'm going to just keep doing this?
I think it was
until I break.
Yeah. I knew I didn't want a catastrophic injury to take me out of the sport, because that's devastating. But I started to feel that question came up in a different way. Not like, oh, what does my legacy of this look like? When am I going to retire? It was the kid conundrum of, I feel like if I choose to have children, that is a choice to not do the sport anymore at this level. Although I know many women who are elite, like Sam Rice, just hit the all-time world record deadlift before Brianni did at the American Pro, and she has a child. But it's like, she had her child, her child's 7. So it's like, if I was to do this right now at my age, I'm most likely priorities are going to change where I don't want to be focused this hard on the sport anymore at my age. And it was such a mental battle of, I felt it was unfair that I had to give up the thing I loved the most in order to have a family, and other people, men, don't have to make that choice in the same way because it's my body. So that was what I dealt with, more of like, well, I need to choose this timeline of when I'm going to have kids because that's going to be the end of my career. So I was like, okay, one more big meet. And ironically, this year was going to be the year that my husband and I were going to start having a family after we both did these competitions, me with the American Pro and him with his, which we both didn't do for different reasons. So that isn't a choice anymore, but I don't think I had this bird's eye view of a plan of, how am I going to plan the next 5 years, or when do I want out, or am I going to do this forever? It was more just the kid decision was what I was dealing with, because I felt like it had to be a choice of an identity of a mother and identity of an elite level powerlifter.
How long do you think that would have, lack of better word, sacrificed your training?
I think I would have been back in as soon as I could, but I don't think I would have wanted to put what the dedication and time it takes to be at this level when I had kids. Like, I knew that I would probably still be a hobbyist for sure and maybe compete again, but I don't think I would want all the sacrifice it takes to be an elite level lifter with your body, your time. I just think that my priorities would have shifted where it wouldn't have mattered as much as it does now.
Yeah. I mean, it's speculation, right? Because it's some do, some don't.
Yeah.
So I've known some women that compete shit within the year, after, and others that it's their whole life just changed.
Yeah.
Right. So that don't.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, right? I couldn't imagine trying to think that one through.
Yeah. I was all over the place. I don't think there'll ever be a world, no matter what happens in my life, where I'm not lifting weights in some capacity, since I've been doing it since I was in high school. But the competitive aspect of it, I don't know where that continuum would have started and ended. But now, unfortunately, that decision was taken away from me at this moment in time in my life. And I don't think that kids are going to be in my future. I'm 35. It's just, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. How has that changed your processing of training and competing?
I don't think I fully have been able to answer that question because it's still been so soon.
Yeah.
So we should probably say what I'm alluding to, because for people who don't know, my husband passed away on June 3rd of this year. So tomorrow it will actually be 5 months. So it's been very recent. And I had the choice to continue the American Pro prep or to drop out of it. And I chose to continue it because my husband was a gnarly motherfucker and he would have been upset if I didn't do the biggest meet that I've ever had the chance to step on the stage for. And I also think that it helped me with coping and not fall into a depression, despair, or drinking a lot, because I prioritized training, eating, my health, my nutrition, everything to a T up until a week before the meet when I had to drop out because I got injured. So I'm thankful that I chose to do the prep still. But also I haven't fully formed my opinion around where I'm at with it, but also I know I still want to keep powerlifting. Like, I love it. I took a momentary break to do strongman because I was bored. I was like, I want something dynamic. And then I was like, no, powerlifting still. Like, that was cool. I did great. I qualified for the Arnold in my second show. But it didn't hit the same. Yeah.
Well, I don't think making a decision in that state, or in this state would be wise either. And I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah.
How did he complement you from the training perspective? Because he was training for his pro card, or did he have his pro card?
No, the show was going to be hopefully where he got it. And then he was going to eat the pro card on stage and retire.
Eat it?
Eat it. Take a bite out of it, eat it. Cause he thought it was bullshit, but he still couldn't let go of how important it was to achieve it. But he thought the way people romanticize it and want to suck your dick cause you have it and hold it to this high standard. He thought it was such a fucking show, such a just bullshit thing that because no one disrespects it. And he wanted to almost show it some disrespect to show like, it's just a fucking piece of paper,
Yeah. You need to tell me more about him, because now what I know about him is he wanted to be married by a midget Elvis, right? And he wanted to win the pro card just so he could eat it.
You would have loved him. He would be shitting his pants to know that I'm here doing this, because he loved you, and he was such an interesting character. Like,
why did he choose bodybuilding to say over powerlifting?
I'm not sure exactly what the I think, again, because the timeline, it was just, he was really into Men in Fitness magazine and all that, which always highlighted bodybuilders.
Yeah.
When he got into the sport, I want to say it was 2 years before we met. So it was 2014. Social media really wasn't even a big thing.
Yeah.
And he idolized those images of the Muscle and Fitness magazine. And he was kind of an alcoholic, very high functioning, had a great job, but would drink every day to excess, to the point where he was hungover until he started drinking again. And he traded that habit for bodybuilding, which I believe a lot of people do in these extreme sports, whether it's bodybuilding, powerlifting. It's that I'm diving everything I have into this so that I don't do that, you know? And I know a lot of people who the gym was their mental retreat, their physical retreat, their reason for not doing drugs or alcohol. And his parents are both addicts, and this was his trade. And it was still a very, very large addiction in his life. But I think once it took him 2 years to compete, because bodybuilding is a lot different of a sport and how long it takes to prepare. And he wouldn't even go to this gym that's by us called Metroflex. I don't know. I mean, I know it's a chain, but it's a pretty hardcore gym, because he felt like he wasn't good enough to go there. Like, he wasn't, you know, a bodybuilder yet. And I was like, what the fuck? It's just a gym. Yeah. And I pushed him to go. And he felt like achieving something in that sport was obtaining a level of respect, because it was so hard, and only a certain I mean, anyone can step on stage and you can look like shit, but really, to be good at it, he won every show he ever did, the overall. And he just knew that level of attrition, like, he was a diver in the Navy, like the attrition level at that small sector was so high, but he could do it. He was mentally tougher than anyone else I ever knew. Like, if his coach said, eat 3 pieces of dog shit today, he would say, from which dog, my male or female, hot or cold? It was like, he was just a good soldier. He would do whatever it took to accomplish the goal. Where I'm kind of like, is it worth it? You know, like, I'm like, I have life outside of this, but he didn't have that switch at all. And that's what I think you need to do to become a pro bodybuilder, because it is so hard. And where in powerlifting, you have one shitty workout, it's not really going to affect your total on the platform, but you miss a meal, you miss a day, it really can make a difference, adding up to the timeline in the end.
They're different. You've done both. They're different. And mentally challenging different too, because in powerlifting, towards, you know, the end of a training cycle, I mean, if you're squatting one heavy squat day per week, I mean, that one goes not so good. As you become better, you realize it's not the end of the world. Right. But as you're not at that stage, you're like, you know, it's all the training. Every training session really matters as you come down into it. Your value is on your. Yeah. Where in bodybuilding, it all matters. You know, actually, the diet and all the other stuff matters more so than they're just different. Yeah. You know, but I believe they complement each other. Yeah. And you're married to the guy, so you're around all this, to where I've always made this broad sweeping thing that powerlifters should train the main lifts like strength athletes, and they should train the accessories like bodybuilders, but most don't. You know, they do their lat pull downs like a freaking idiot. Yeah. You know, where if you watch if they're kind of just doing that for hypertrophy anyhow. Yeah. So when you think you want to do it for the greatest bang on the buck, was his training did it influence how you trained those accessories? He trained harder than a motherfucker. Like, we actually used to train together until I got pretty good at powerlifting, and then we kind of separated because our training styles became so different. But I mean, he could RDL like 700 pounds. He was insanely strong. And I try to get him to do powerlifting here and there. But he's not going to failure as a bodybuilder and as a powerlifter are two totally different things. But I would say, watching his intensity, yes. Like, I would kind of do, 3 sets of 12, his 3 sets of 12 looked very different than my 3 sets of 12. And being around him in the gym, his electric energy and how hard he pushed, you couldn't be a bitch, or you would feel like you're disrespecting
this effort that you're watching. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why our gym is so insane. I'm sure it happens here because people fucking put their blood and guts in their heart. Even if he was doing shoulder day, it was all out max effort shoulder day every time. And if I could look at him and like, he's dying, like not literally dying at the time, depleted and hungry and whatever, and he's still pushing it that hard, it's like, you have no excuse. So yes, I would say he influenced me in his tenacity to never phone it in. Every session, never phoned it in. And if I ever caught myself doing that, I'd kind of feel guilty about it. It was the example that he set more so than actually like the movements he was doing and the weight that he pushed.
Did you guys train at the same time, or was that something that you had to do at different times just because you're around each other all the time?
No, we trained very similar times. I would start training maybe around 4:30. He usually started training around 5:30. His training would go a little bit longer than mine, but we overlapped a lot. And I would spot him here, he'd spot me there. But he had his training partners and I had my training partners, especially when we moved to the bigger gym. But I loved, just watching him from across the room, or like, he would hit a gnarly squat set and kind of everybody would turn and watch. And something that we carried from the first gym to the second gym is the first gym, it was only, 900 square feet of floor space. So the second gym, we fenced off our powerlifting area to only be about 1,500 square feet. So that if someone was hitting a big squat, everybody's in this cage. It's caged in, like the cage, and everybody would watch. And that energy is something we never wanted to lose. And whether I'm hitting a big squat, he's hitting a big squat, someone else is hitting a big squat, it's so awesome to watch, and it pushes you to want to do more.
It also keeps people in area to be able to spot.
Yeah.
Because they will drift off.
Yeah.
That was one of the issues I had when Westside moved from the location that I was in to their newer location, is it got 4 times bigger. And you used to always have people around, when they were squatting. But then after that, it's like, where the fuck is everybody at?
Yeah.
They're way on the other side. And
you're mentally ready to go. And it's like,
you're like calling people over, where fencing it in is it's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's awesome. I wish we would have done it a little bigger, but also I'm like, no, it's fucking sick. It just forces everybody to be in that environment. Yeah.
Did the nutritional influence carry over to you?
No, because I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian it'll be 12 years next month. And he was miserable eating all the time. Like just the amount of food he would have to eat. I mean, at his biggest, I think he got to 325 pounds as 5'10". And I like a more holistic approach to nutrition, since I did have an eating disorder for 14 years, where I really try to I'll measure it once and then I'll just eat the same shit every day. So I don't have to be measuring my food all of the time. Where if we're at Disney, like he's bringing out a scale and, doing like, it was 24/7, 365 for him, where I'm like, I'll do it for 4 weeks, So I would say that it influenced me in that I felt like I was caring for a child at times, because we had to pack his food and, wake up, we had 64-ounce thermoses. We had 6 of them. So if we were going on a day trip, he would pack 4 to 6 of them in the morning. So he would have food for the entire day. And it actually influenced me in the opposite way, where I was like, I really still want that freedom to enjoy a little bit of life, where I feel like bodybuilding is so all encompassing. It bleeds to every aspect that you not that you don't get to enjoy life, but you don't get a moment to pause, even if it's food or sleep or whatever. Everything matters, like you said.
Let's go back to your shoulder. So that you had it basically cleaned up the first time.
Yeah.
Right. How long did that last?
Oh, it's still great.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had it done December 7th last year. I had supraspinatus tear again, teres minor tear, and a labral tear, all partial thickness. And when I did PRP, for those of you who don't know, it's platelet-rich plasma. It's not covered by insurance because it's about 50-50 whether it works. The reason why is because your plasma is only as good as you are healthy. So for a young individual who eats well and is healthy, it's going to work great. And it has amazing evidence for musculotendinous junction repair. I got that done in July. In December, when I had the surgery, it was nothing. She said she threaded it with surgical thread, pulled on it as hard as she could, and couldn't fully tear them. So they didn't need repaired. But I had a bone spur sticking into my subacromial space, which is kind of like a tooth sticking in there, and then it rubs on your nerves and your tendon. It's super fucking painful. So that was causing more pain than the muscle tears. And she shaved that off, cleaned up everything. I was on the bench within a week, just, doing the movement with the PVC. And within 3 months, I would say I was 90%. So that was super successful. I've had no pain since. And that has been my historical bad shoulder since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward now, I started noticing around 4 months ago, kind of a weird, I thought I strained my middle delt. I was like, that's a weird strain. Well, you really can't tear your delt. So I'm fine. I'm going to keep pushing. It was the first time I benched 300. I did 297 it was supposed to be a triple. I did it for a double. And I felt this gnarly strain. And I was like, that's weird. Maybe I'm compensating from the left shoulder, and it just kind of kept getting a little bit worse, just getting a little bit more painful on the press. I went and got an x-ray. She's like, yeah, you have a bone spur on this one too. And I was like, okay, let's schedule for the surgery. And then, so this was over the course of about 2 months. The morning I scheduled for the surgery, which was the week before the pro, that day I tore something in my shoulder doing a warm up, 264 pounds. When I can bench over 330, that's not a heavy weight for me. And I thought I tore my bicep because I felt it slip out of the groove. I've never felt anything like that, but I tore my teres minor on this side. So it was like my humerus translating back, moved my bicep tendon. And I was in like 10 out of 10 pain that day. And then it has subsided where only if I do certain specific rotational movements can I feel it, but I know I tore it. And I don't think it's bad enough where she's going to need to do a significant repair. I think it's just like a belly tear and it'll heal on its own.
You have ultrasound, right?
Yeah.
Have you looked to see how bad it is?
No, because, I can't do that position myself. But I do diagnostic musculoskeletal ultrasound, and it is the best tool ever. Oh, yeah. But I'm like, she's already going in there. She'll figure it out. Because at first I was like, I should get an MRI because I really thought the bicep, I thought it was detached. And like you said, I thought I was going to need to move my surgery up.
Yeah.
Because if it was detached, I wanted that relocated or replaced. And, but I can tell it's not.
Would you, from your professional standpoint, to me, I'd rather have somebody look at me with the ultrasound than MRI at this point.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I think people carry such a mental weight on the MRI. They just want to know, but it's usually not that accurate, right? I like ultrasound because it's dynamic and you can see it in real time. You can see multiple angles. You can keep moving it. Where MRI, it's like, it was that. For my left shoulder, I got 2 MRIs with contrast because the first time it didn't see the labral tear. And I was like, I know my labrum is torn. I know, the tests. I know what this feels like. Second MRI, oh yeah, it is torn. We just didn't see it the first time. Mm-hmm. It's like, what the fuck? Like, what's the point of this? You know?
Yeah.
I think it is a great tool that people don't utilize often enough because I don't think people know about it. Because,
I think you're right. They don't know.
Yeah. The gold standard is the MRI. Yeah. And people don't know that there's this non-invasive, non-magnetic imaging where you're not exposing yourself to radiation. It is literally a tool that just reflects light in your body and you can see everything. Yeah.
And when there's a non-surgical orthopedic that I see out of Cincinnati, if something's good, I know that day. As long as it's not super inflamed. Yeah. Like if it's super inflamed, it's a little dicier. Yeah. For him to kind of figure it out. Yeah. But then is it like all the way off? Is it partially torn? Yeah. And where the MRI is like maybe in a couple of days. Yeah. You might be able to know if you intervene and go get the image before the doctor does. Yeah. Yeah.
I usually tell people 48 hours till I see them. Because a lot of times people are bitches and they think they did something kind of like me. I thought I did something crazy. And then after, 24 hours, I was like, oh, no, I know I didn't. But I like to especially when there's a significant amount of swelling, I like to let it get a little bit better before I'm going to go in there and assess. But it's not damaging. It's just an image. So, I could and I can. And I have seen someone the next day after they tore their pec. And it's awesome to be able to tell someone exactly what is going on.
Especially with a pec, because if it's the tendon's still there, there's options. Right. One is to not do anything. Right. And I've seen people get pec reattachments on pecs that weren't completely tore off.
Right. And then they have to, now you have a full thickness tear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Biceps, another one. Yeah. That kind of go in there. And this conversation is good because people will be aware. Because I would have to assume that any ortho is going to have access probably in their office.
I don't understand why orthos don't.
Yeah.
Like when I go she does ultrasound guided injections, but they don't offer, they don't, because it's not as much money. If for those of you who don't know, it's a ultrasound, the same thing that you see if you're pregnant. I have a handheld tool that's about the size of your glasses case. It plugs into my phone, and it's meant to put in your pocket and walk around the hospital and see things. And I have the image up on my phone, and I'm showing them as I'm scanning in real time. This is the muscle. Like, I've seen a retracted tendon up in someone's mid hamstring that's been torn for like a week and a half. And I was like, oh, good thing it's, the small one.
Yeah.
And, but it's not going to reattach itself now at this point. But it's non-invasive, it's non-radiation. You just put a little ultrasound gel on and you can see. So if you guys know anyone who has access to this, it's a great diagnostic tool. I charge $50.
Oh God.
It takes 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's easy.
Yeah, I can't overstate the use of that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so much faster, and even if it's private pay,
Yeah.
if it's private pay, it's probably built in to the cost of the appointment.
Yeah, if I do an evaluation, I tell them if ultrasound is needed, I do it. But if someone just wants to come in for a scan, I just charge $50. Now, you can't see through bone. You can't see in like the articular joint of a hip. Like, so bone doesn't reflect the light, so it stops the image. But anything musculoskeletal that's relatively superficial and not inside of a joint, you can see it all.
What are the most popular frequent injuries that you're seeing with lifters? So moving more into where you specialize now is, or are known for most, is with intermediate and above lifters. What are the things that you see most frequently? I know lower back's there, so we'll cover that.
That is it.
But
yes.
Yeah, once we get there. So, and with that, what are a lot of the misconceptions that you run into with the population that you're working with in that case?
Misconception in what way?
In the way that they think that general lifestyle doesn't impact it, like how they sleep, how they move, how they get around. B, that sometimes they just need to wear the belt tighter instead of, doing things to be able to help re-educate whatever's fucked up. C, that may not even be where the problem is.
That is the biggest misconception. I see that people treat symptoms and not problems. That is the biggest bitch I have about chiropractors. 90% of them I hate, sorry, but they treat symptoms because they want you to keep coming back. Because if they fix the problem, the symptom is gone. And I think it's where people are feeling the pain, but where the pain is actually coming from, a lot of times aren't one and the same. But I would say the biggest misconception or thing that generally leads to injuries that I see in my practice is asymmetries. Whether that's one shoulder is tighter than the other, one arm is weaker than the other, one leg is longer than the other, one hip is tighter than the other. I explain it this way. When you have an asymmetry, you're walking around the world, you're not really gonna mess something up with just a little bit of unevenness. But when you load it, you're amplifying that asymmetry largely, whether you're carrying more weight on one quad than the other or benching unevenly. And then that's how you blow your pec. Like I had someone strained his pec, was doing really narrow grip bench because he didn't feel it. And I was like, whoa, his feet on the bench press were like a foot apart. I was like, that's how you strain your pec, because you're pushing so much harder on whatever foot is tucked more, you're going to push harder on that arm. So that foot that's tucked, you're loading your body so much more on the other side. And we realigned his feet. He was also crooked on the bench, favoring one shoulder more than the other. And he went to his regular grip. He's like, I don't even feel this. I just strained this 2 days ago. And so asymmetries, in my opinion, are the largest predictor of what's going to cause an eventual injury, because over time, that loading, it's going to amplify it and it's going to add to the asymmetry even more, whether you're growing one quad because you're using it more, whatever the case may be.
To go a little deeper in the weeds with that, using that same example of the foot being off on one to the other, and say this is a pattern they've been doing for 2 years, there's been compensation patterns that have formed because of that. So just moving it back is kind of a fix, but is it really? It
depends. If they have an anatomical variance, like say one leg is longer than the other, it takes it. So I do explain to people this might be a fix for right now, but as long as you've been doing this maladaptive behavior, it's going to take that much and probably longer to undo this maladaptive behavior. Sometimes just fixing that makes a difference immediately if it's something small. Sometimes if it's systemic and they've grown muscles more than the other on one side, you do have to work towards it. But then, so I'm not a huge exercise prescriber. I feel like with the population that I treat, you're already fucking exercising all the time. Like, I'm not going to give you some dumb low level. That's why people hate PTs, because they prescribe stuff for athletes that just doesn't make sense. And I will prescribe very certain and specific things to help fix an asymmetry. And I do think it takes time to undo, but just leveling someone up can make a world of difference because they're not stressing their body in the same way.
Yeah. Using your shoulders as an example, that could be another asymmetry, right? Because you had work done on one, and then there's got to be some asymmetry that's going to come from that, just them being in there, you know, to the other side. It may be the shoulder, it may be the pec. With that, what should the athlete kind of keep in mind when coming back from, let me back up. There are asymmetries that can develop because of that. So as we back it up, you know, post-surgery, what are some of the things that they should be aware of to make that less likely to be the issue?
I think under the bar is where it matters the most. For example, a lot of people who have a shoulder, say you just had shoulder issues, shoulder surgery, a lot of people, so say it's my left, will preferentially shift under the bar and give that injured shoulder more room. So guess what? You just tipped the, you know, the seesaw. Now you're carrying more load on this side of your body because the bar is shifted. So having someone there to line you up because of a shoulder injury, same thing with the bench. For shoulders, a lot of people will shift their body and support the injured shoulder more. So you don't even realize that you're off on the bench. So whatever shoulder's dipping off, so say I'm skewed, so I'm supporting the shoulder more. This one is now taking more load because it's off of the bench more. So it's like making sure you're symmetrical under the load outside of even, you know, stretching and exercises and all the things that you can do. I think when you're under the load is going to make the most difference because that's when you'll usually compensate to give the injured side assistance. But a lot of times that can actually be a hindrance or unevenly loading the injured side when you think you're just, and you don't even notice you're doing it. Your body just adapts and does it anyways.
Now, when it is the back, you know, what are the fixes or recommendations? Because they're not here, right? So there's a lot of, it depends with that. But in general, what are some of the what are some of the things that lead to creating the issue in the first place? Let's go there. Yeah.
This is the number one thing I see and treat in my private practice is low back pain. And it usually stems from one of two reasons. One is an anatomical variation. And what I mean by that is flat feet or uneven legs. So just like hands are slightly different sizes, balls are different sizes, breasts are different sizes, we are not completely symmetrical beings. If your legs anatomically, so people go to chiros and like, your hips are off, your hips are off. You could go to chiro for 10 years and they might tell you your hips are off. Well, your hips move independent of another and they can be compensating because your legs are off anatomically. And no one gets out a fucking tape measure and measures their legs. And I hate it. And I've met people who have had that same issue for 10 years and I put a heel lift in and they're like, oh my God, all of my problems are gone and I didn't even touch you. So measuring the legs to anatomically make sure that they're different length. 1/4 of an inch is what your body can accommodate for naturally. So if your left leg is 1/4 of an inch longer than your right, your body can make the adjustment without it being pathological. Add lifting to that and the 1/4 inch might get a little hairy, but normally it's not. But if you're more than that, you might need to do an external lift where you put something in your shoe to make the shorter leg taller. The other thing is pronated or flat feet. If someone has 2 flat feet, it's typically genetic, like mom or dad have flat feet. If someone has 1 flat feet, it's usually an adaptation because of a longer leg. They sprain that ankle, you know, whatever it may be. That pronation or flat feet causes internal rotation of the legs, which changes the way that your body prioritizes recruiting muscle groups. It will use your adductors as a primary hip and knee extensor instead of your glutes. So that is why like women have more knee cave anyways because their pelvis is wider. But if your feet are flat, you're going to have more knee cave because your body's like, what's the easiest way from A to B? And when you get a little bit of knee valgus, which is where your knees come in when you have flat feet, it's the adductors. Those two things can both create tight hips when the femur is internally rotated or one foot is flat. That creates tight hip flexors. Psoas and iliacus are the two hip flexor muscles. They're the most dominant muscle in the whole body. When I see people like, oh, I have weak hip flexors, I'm like, I haven't even met an 80-year-old with weak hip flexors. Like, you use them when you breathe. It attaches your upper to your lower half. And when those get tight, it pulls your spine in extension. People think it pulls your spine in flexion, like, oh, my hip flexors are tight. No, our spines have extension, and it pulls it into extreme extension, which what it does on the backside is it makes that low back area tight in extension. It makes it hard to get spinal flexion down there. I usually use visual aids when I'm describing all of this with a model, and then people are like, oh, whoa, I see it now. But the muscles in the front are connected to the same 4 lumbar spinal segments as the muscles in the back. So it's this reciprocal relationship where whatever hip is tight, the other side of the back starts to compensate. So you're like, oh, my left side of my back hurts. And I was like, oh, your right hip is tight, huh? And they're like, how did you know? And I was like, that's just the pattern that is the clinical prediction pattern that it fits. And I always ask people, like, have you thrown your back out before? That experience where it's not even usually weightlifting. It's like you're picking up dog shit or tying your shoe and you seize up. Well, that's your body's protective mechanism because it's stuck in extension so much. You get a quick flexion response and your central nervous system is like, our shit is going to sever. We need to protect this house. And it goes into spasm, and it usually lasts a week, sometimes 3 weeks. And once it happens once, it usually will happen again, predictably every couple of months, and it gets less in severity each time. But you're in this feedback cycle loop where you're like, fuck, I have this back pain. And you go to the doctor, they do x-rays, they do MRIs. Tight muscles don't show up on an x-ray or an MRI. And then you think you're crazy because you're like, I have this pain and no one can fix it. And really it is just this symbiotic relationship of tight hips, which create a tight low back. Your lumbar spine doesn't really do any other motion besides flex and extend. It has some accessory rotation and side bend, but it is the primary motion for flexing and extending. The moment you have an error in a deadlift or a squat where you come forward, you lose your brace, anything, that spinal flexion happens in your lumbar spine because the fulcrum moves from your hips up. And then that's when people usually really get in trouble, when they're already compromised back there. But this pattern also plays into not just anatomical, which is the first reason, but lifestyle. Especially in California, I have people who drive 2 hours a day. Hour to work, 2 hours to work, 2 hours to work. You sit at a desk job. You have tight hip flexors by virtue of your lifestyle. And then you go to the gym and you're trying to get spinal flexion, but your body's just stuck in the stronghold of extension. They're such dominant, strong muscles that all it takes is like a 45-minute release. And it's just insane the amount of change it can make in your pain and your low back pain. And it's just a lot of education. And then a little bit of maintenance yourself, like with a sew right or a tool that can get in there. I saw you have a couple of them over there. And then you can maintenance yourself. And that's the difference between, I think, a great physical therapist and a shitty chiropractor is they want you to keep coming back, whereas a physical therapist is going to teach you the tools to help yourself.
Yeah. Well, that will bring us into the next conversation of like maintenance, right? For the same demographic that we're talking about, because things that, and when you're a 20-year-old beginner, I mean, they still should learn good habits, but they can kind of get away with anything, even fucked up shit. It hurts your heart a little bit to watch it because you kind of want to still be able to do it, right? But
once you hit 30, it's just not the same.
No, it definitely. Well, I think it changes too, the better and the stronger that you get. So age definitely is a variable for sure, 100%. But so is how strong you are. Yeah. Right. Because now when you misgroove something, there's greater consequences because there's larger weight.
Absolutely.
So with the concept of maintenance, you know, how would you and what would you recommend for? Because you just said a release, right? So outside, because there's other issues of shoulders are in it. There's, what is it? Shoulders, hips, knees, here nor there, you know, but usually it's back, shoulders, and anything else is just like chaos, like torn pecs, biceps, triceps. Even the releasing will help that, but some of those are more acute. Yeah. Right. I don't want to say unavoidable, but sometimes if the bar goes that way for whatever reason, you're just fucked.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Yeah. Overhead log. I think you hurt your shoulder originally with log or strongman, right?
Yes.
Or CrossFit, then strongman. I mean, it's overhead. It goes the wrong way. You're just.
Anything that's dynamic is more vulnerable for sure. Yeah.
So getting back to the concept of maintenance, what would you suggest in what modalities to, let's go different. What modalities should they avoid? Right? Because there's a lot of modalities and there's a lot of practitioners that are out there. A lot of snake oil shit that's out there too.
Sure. I hate scraping. I think it has its benefit and application in very specific windows, such as scar tissue, surgical recovery, all of that. But in my opinion, and what it does essentially is it creates microscopic tears. That's what Graston is. That's why you get so much bruising and so much. I think it's catastrophic what you're doing. You are creating someone who's vulnerable to injury by scraping the shit out of their pec. Like, oh, let me create a bunch of micro tears. All right, go train that under load. I think it is abused and misused because I think people like the wow factor. Like people love cupping because of the bruising. Like when you go to physical therapy and you do some exercises, it's like, what do you have to show for it? You know, like, oh, I improved my internal rotation 5 degrees. It's, I think scraping is very dangerous, especially for the sport of powerlifting, absolute strength sports. I think it has its place, especially if you're taking time off. But I think I like to treat people where I always say there's treatment and there's trauma. I'm not trying to cause trauma. I'm trying to give you treatment so that you can still train. And I think I kind of said, mobility is hypersensationalized, where there's a fine balance with stability and mobility. And if you have too much mobility in a sport like powerlifting, you're not going to be stable enough. And if you're too stable and you don't have enough mobility, you're not going to be able to achieve the depth that you need in the range of motion. So I think that fine-tuning balance is a little bit more important than people give it credit for, because you really want to be as stable as possible. You want your joints to have the most integrity as possible so that they can tolerate the highest amount of load. I think the best plan of action, I think people underutilized services such as body work. A massage is one thing, but a specialist such as a sports massage therapist or a physical therapist who knows how to who typically only does manual therapy like myself, not a traditional therapist. It's like changing the oil in your car. Like, how many miles are you going to go before you replace your oil? It's the same with your body. I think because powerlifters historically don't invest as much money as a sport like bodybuilding, they don't see the value in treating themselves as a product in the aspect of recovery, that they are like, oh, I can just stretch it away or use the Theragun. The Theragun doesn't really have evidence that it makes meaningful tissue changes. What it does is it works on something called the gate channel theory of pain, where it actually overloads and overstimulates the receptors to where it blunts pain temporarily, where you can't feel it because you're getting so much input. And that's why people love it. And it is excitatory and it helps prepare you for performance, but it doesn't actually change the length of the tissue. The evidence doesn't show it. So it's like people fucking hypervolting themselves for an hour before they train. Like, yeah, your muscles are excited and ready to go, but did you change the length of your bicep? Not really. You know,
are there times of the year, say, assuming there's a meet coming up, are there times that obviously after the meet would be a good place? Should they avoid trying to get anything done if it's too close to the meet?
I'd say 4 days out is about the most you would want to do, because you need to give the tissue time to heal and recover. Some practitioners are better than the others. Like some create a lot of trauma and some don't. But I would say 4 days out is the perfect window where you're not going to be sore going into the meet.
All right. The question I'd have, and I may not frame this the right way, would be scar tissue. I'll use my pec as an example to kind of illustrate this. When I was, because I've tore both of them, so I would go through phases of the scar tissue building up and then tearing. And so then I had to be really conscious of when I would have that worked on, because that scar tissue was temporarily doing the role of what the muscle was. And if they would break it down, then I train hard too soon.
And you cause more tear.
I create more of an issue where they're in a fucked up way. There were like certain times where if I strained it, say 4 weeks before me, perfect. Then it's going
you got it over with.
It's going to be good for that to be able to carry through. But with those cases, usually it's going to be pecs are probably going to be the ones that typically carry the most scar tissue that can put somebody out of a meet. trying to think of other like biceps and shit like that.
Patella, quad.
Patella, quad.
Yeah.
Quad's a good one.
Yeah.
So the quad would definitely fall in this as well. How should they go about, because there's that healing process in the off season, it should give it time to actually really let it heal. But there is that fucked up window, you know, with those top competitors that they're going to figure out how to get there no matter what.
Right.
Are there time frames with certain things like that they shouldn't do in certain times?
I want to parlay off of the scar tissue because I have a theory about it, that maybe there's evidence for this as my own personal anecdote, that I don't believe it's a scar tissue tearing. Scar tissue, like when you anchor a bicep, it's stronger than you're more likely to tear the other one.
Yeah.
The scar tissue is tougher than the actual muscle.
Yeah.
I believe you're tearing the tissue surrounding the scar tissue.
No, I would tend to think that's true.
So then to answer your question, I think it's hard because I think so many people tear themselves catastrophically during a meet, or, you know, right at that 6 to 8 week window where you're like, there's enough time where I can recover. You know, if you have something small leading into a meet, typically the rest is going to give you enough to be okay. Like I treated 2 athletes 2 days before the pro. They came over my Airbnb and I was kind of helping just with little aches and pain strains here and there. But I think hydration plays a huge factor in muscle tearing in general. I think people overlook that. I think one of the major reasons why people do have a tear is that micronutrient imbalance with sodium, magnesium, potassium, and water. Like, oh, were you drinking the night before? Like you're just a little bit dehydrated, and then you get that tearing. As far as a specific timeline goes with that, I don't think I have a good recommendation. Or
I don't know if there is one, to be honest with you.
I think it's just so variable because some people are such like, sorry, fucking pussies, that the moment they feel a little something, they're like, oh, geez. And then some people push it to the 10th degree where they're like, it's torn off, but is it off the bone? Can I still press? You know what I mean? Like, so I think also like working with a consistent provider, whether it's your sports massage or your physical therapist who knows you well enough to know or has enough experience to know what the tissue feels like. For example, I was just working with a gymnast who had a full thickness tear of her Achilles. She's had her physical therapist for like since she was 14 years old and she's 25 now. I saw her twice and I was like, she didn't do enough work on this. She's got a ball the size of a gumball. And I worked it out in 2 sessions. And I was like, I think people need to not be afraid to know how to manipulate tissue, especially with it's an athlete who can handle a lot, and especially when it's scar tissue that I know is tougher than the tissue surrounding it. So I don't want that imbalance between the really tough scar tissue and the vulnerable tissue next to it. So I will try to work on that scar tissue as fast as possible so that they don't have this weak point in between that bridge.
Yeah. I think having what you just mentioned there is having like a PT kind of like on call that knows you. Yeah. Because some of the cases that come to my mind when I think of the scenarios that I'm talking about is I know several people that tweak their quad a little bit, say 4 weeks out. I mean, realistically, they're done. There's nothing else. They can still compete. There's no reason to test it 3 more times with heavier load before the meet. I mean, you have like one more heavy day and then you're deloading for the meet. You're done. Like just let it heal. And then by the time you get to the meet, you'll be fine. But historically, I've seen people that, I need to go in to make sure mentally it's not going to tear. Yeah. And then they end up tearing the shit before the meet. Yeah. If they just would have fucking let it, you know, it's more heroic to tear it at the meet anyhow. Yeah. You know, so if it's going to happen, you know, do it where it's going to count. And, but I see that a lot, right? Because and I've never really understood it because like test what? You know, the work's kind of done.
I mean, I did that with my shoulder, but it was more, do I need to lower my opener or not? And I needed to know. Yeah. And as I was warming up to get there, it blew, but it was for a different reason. But I think it's that mental security of, okay, 4 weeks later, am I stepping on the platform? Can I even do this or not? Yeah. I think peptides, not that I'm recommending anyone take or do anything, but I think they're an underutilized tool that we're learning a lot more about, like BPC and TB and the healing properties that they do have within the body. And I think, you know, do your own research, but I've had a lot of excellent experience with them from minor tweaks, strains, baby tears, mid-belly tears. I always tell people the best tear you can have is a mid-belly tear because it's not directly getting yanked on all the time by the tendon and you're not in a vulnerable position by the tendon. Just let that mid-belly go.
Yeah, with that, are you speaking site injections or sub-Q, or does it matter?
Site. I mean, the evidence shows that they're systemic, but I think always get it localized to the area if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With going back to the injuries here, the shoulder we kind of got into, the back, I guess where I want to go with this is back to the warm-up, which we just kind of touched on a little bit, because it's either 45 minutes or 0. And the answer is always somewhere in between. That's everything, right? The answer is, if there's this side and this side, the answer is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
What would you recommend as far as the warm-up process goes, assuming that the warm-up isn't there to build work capacity?
Yeah.
Right? Say some athletes are doing it because it is just a part of their training that goes before the heavier bodybuilders, for instance, might do some more accessory stuff before they really do heavier stuff to prepare them, but they're not powerlifters either.
Right.
So from that angle, we already know the two. I don't believe either side's actually wrong either, because if you feel good, there's no sense in doing a whole lot of other shit. But I don't know how long you can actually get away with that either.
Right. Or doing everything and doing nothing.
Yeah.
I think what people fail to do a lot of times in training is stop emulating and start critically thinking about yourself.
What do you mean by emulating?
Just seeing what everybody else is doing online. I saw this routine and I saw that, and know, and then they have this fucking list 45 pages long, or it's like, oh, my favorite powerlifter just does this, so I'm just going to do that. And it's like, when did you do your own self-assessment and inventory of what you feel like your needs are? And I think that's where a great coach comes in and kind of does that little Q&A questionnaire with you. Like, okay, when you start warming up for bench, where do you feel it? Or what do you normally do? Okay, well, you're doing 3 lat movements. Which one of these can we remove? Or can we make a lat movement dynamic so that we're doing something else? And it's just that inventory of, well, where am I tight? Where am I loose? What do I feel like I need to warm up more? And then what actually fits that need? I think people just get into this ritualized routine where they see what other people do, or foam rolling. Like just, that's just, you grab a foam roll and you go on the turf and it's your 20-minute social hour, right? And again, that's not necessarily bad. If you're getting something out of it, you're reconnecting with your friends and, spending that time decompressing. Cause, in California, I just fucking drove 45 minutes to get here. I'm not ready to go into the gym and just get under the bar. I need that transition period. But I do think people don't self-analyze and aren't critical enough of themselves to make their own kind of treatment plan when it comes to warm-up plan. And I think like you had Dr. Locke on here, Andrew Locke. I fucking love that man. And he following someone like him, if you don't follow Andrew Locke and you're in strength sports, you're doing something wrong. He gives so many valuable tools. So it's like, look at them all and see like, oh, I think this would be beneficial to me, instead of like, my favorite powerlifter does this, and this, so I'm going to do that as well, because they might have specific needs that you don't. And I think that that's the missing connection, is just being the mindless monkey and following what you see online, as opposed to taking a self-assessment inventory and pairing that with what needs you have. Yeah.
Or one of the things I kind of always went by, if whatever that lift is for the day, it's a squat or bench, I'll come in and then do the bar or whatever it is and be like, ooh, fuck. And then immediately I have feedback like, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. So I kind of know.
That's your self-assessment.
Here's some things I probably ought to do.
Yeah.
And it's so common sense to me that I forget to mention things like that. And I think that happens with a lot of people that have been around the sport for a long time. There's just so many things.
Yeah.
Like if it's squat day, I come in, I'll sit on a box with a little bit with squat stance, be, ooh, fuck. That's sometimes it's like, oh shit, this feels good.
Yeah.
Like
it's going to be a good day.
This will be good. I don't need to do a bunch of other shit. But to circle back, because if they have a good coach, then there are good coaches out there, but there's another side of that relationship, is the client being able to ask better questions, taking accountability for what they do. And I guess holding the coach accountable too, and so being on both sides of that dynamic, what would the recommendations be for those people that are working with a coach? Because I think a lot of times they fall short in asking better questions, or more specific questions, or just simply sometimes asking why.
Yeah.
And I don't know any coach that's going to avoid those.
Yeah. I love it when my clients would ask me, well, as long as I had the time for it, get into a dialogue and go back and forth. But I think that circles a little bit back to what I said earlier, where people are intimidated to approach their coach because they feel like there's this power dynamic sometimes where it's like, well, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to feel like I'm annoying. It's like, well, that's what you're paying them for.
Yeah.
So I think a coach setting that expectation in the beginning, like, you can reach out to me for this, that, and the other. And I think sometimes in today's day and age, a phone call is so underrated. Like, you can accomplish so much more having a discussion on the phone or a video chat. Like, I remember I did take on about 5 clients at the end of last year or the beginning of this year, I forget, just because I kind of was like missing it a little bit. And once every 2 weeks or a month, I would do a video call with them and say, like, let's just do a check-in. Where do you feel like your needs are? What do you feel like is getting done? Like, and that's where it's a perfect opportunity to ask those questions. And I think that an athlete needs to understand that a coach just isn't giving you a program. It's a holistic environment where it doesn't just start under the bar. It starts when you walk into the gym, or even a coach helping with mindset training, because a lot of coaching is therapizing, right? Like, I missed this lift and it's, catastrophic. So I think the barrier should be broken down a little bit more, where it feels like it's an accessible question to ask. And maybe I'm placing a little bit more blame or burden of responsibility on the coach to allow that door to be open more often.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you feel like your needs are being met with your warm-ups, with your training, as far as like how they do their feedback on a weekly basis? Well,
yeah. And I'm going to push this back out there to kind of put it more on the client as well. It's a good way to test the coach. So 2 things I'm going to put out there is, it's a great way to test if your coach is actually good or not.
Yeah. Are they just giving you a recycled program that they got from someone? Do they know their shit?
Yeah. Because there's choices. There's a lot of choices. Then on the other side, of what you just said, if you're looking to increase the lifetime value of who that client is by doing what you just said every few months, I'll guarantee increases the lifetime value over other coaches, because probably nobody does that.
Yeah, I think it's rare.
It's really rare. And it's a little bit of time that may keep that person a client for 4 years, 3 years. The longer you can have them, the better.
And they might tell you something that you can't see. Something that's going on that just you can't see. Like, I've really had this nagging pain in my glute. Like, oh, that's why you're shifting. Or, oh, that's why this. That makes sense. Why didn't you tell me that?
Yeah.
You're just not giving them the opportunity where they feel comfortable to express that to you. And I think multiple modes of media, whether it's videos, text, or phone calls, are the ways that you can get a full picture of someone.
It sounds to me, as we've gone through this conversation, that you have different assessment tools, obviously, that you work with, as the physical therapist, but it sounds like you lean a lot on using the main 3 lifts as those assessment tools as well.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. It's powerlifting, right?
Well, yeah.
So,
but you're looking at it differently too.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at it, I'm looking for these specific weak points and so forth. You're looking at the symmetry. You're looking at it from a different set of eyes.
Yeah. And that's why I think what I do is so unique, because I have a lens with my education that a lot of people don't.
Yeah. So that can complement, right? So if, say you teamed up with another coach per se, right? And you have, or the client, but let me dial this back because I like to fall back on client accountability, right? So if the client is working with another coach and then was to hire you to look at their lifts, you're going to look at that in a completely different lens, totally, a different camera than what the powerlifting coach is going to look at that. So it's only going to complement them to be able to take advantage of a service like that.
I do that all the time. I do one-on-ones with clients who have coaches, and I always say, I hope your coach is not offended, but also I think that would be a sign of a poor coach who...
Yeah, they shouldn't be.
No, right. Like, if I had a client who was like, oh, I went and saw this therapist and they told me this, I was like, great. That's something that I didn't see. Excellent. I think that it takes emotional maturity. And I think that's a sign of a great coach who understands that they might not know it all. And like, I don't feel like I know it all. I know a very specific, great skill set in a very niche market. And then there's a lot of things that I don't. And like, even, Andrew Locke, like I've watched some of his stuff and I'm like, oh, wow. It's seeing that different experience from other people can only help you grow as a lifter. Now, there is a limitation and caveat to that, because when you're taking in all the cookies and putting them in your cookie jar, it's like, holy shit, I have too much information that I don't know what to do with. And I think that's one of the blessings and curses of the internet, where there's so much information available. It's like, what do you sift and sort through that's meaningful to you? But that's why I think that in-person relationship is so different.
Yeah, the coaches will look at lifts through 3 different lenses that I've kind of broken down. One will be the shittiest one. The coach that just looks at it from an effort standpoint, and that's all they're looking for.
Hard?
Are they pushing hard? And then the other one that's looking at bar path, and then the other one that's looking at body mechanics. Now, some will look at, at all 3. The good ones will look at all 3. But I don't believe you can be exceptional at all 3.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll get pushback on that, but it's fucking true, because unless you have a PhD in body mechanics, you're kind of guessing.
Yeah.
And you can see some of these things happening, knee valgus or whatever it is, but the reason why you may not actually know.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
seeing it and knowing how to fix it are 2 different things.
It gets a little out of the scope of practice per se.
Yeah.
For that. And then vice versa, if you got a physical therapist that's never done powerlifting and that's all they're looking at, and the bar path is for shit. It may look great, body mechanics, but the bar, the bar's all over the place. So I think when people are looking at their education with multiple sources that are out there, they should know what lens the coach is kind of presenting through.
Yeah.
And that forms one filter.
I think there's an additional layer on this that I explain to people all of the time. That is something you can't see. And sometimes it's a feeling you get eventually, where I think there's a difference between a good coach and a great coach. A good coach teaches what they know and usually what works for them.
Yeah.
A great coach can take a principle and apply it dynamically to multiple different people in different versions. And I think that feeling you get when you've kind of outgrown your coach is that I'm just applying what I know to you, what I've learned, not I'm taking multiple resources and learning different things about different types of bodies and ways of doing things. Like, I didn't know anything about sumo for a long time until I finally was like, all right, I need to learn, or I don't do hook grip, but I need to learn how to do hook grip so that I can teach others. It's not what I know and what I do, but this might be best for your body and how you're lifting. And that's, I think, with the switch with a great coach. And that kind of goes hand in hand with those lenses of a good coach just sees things, and a great coach has a different understanding of how to apply things. And it's through those different lenses of how you can become a better lifter by going through the ranks of, because we all need different coaches to meet us where we're at.
Of course.
Like, I'm not going to work with a lifter who's never touched a bar. Well, I will, to show them how to lift, but like to coach them to a meet, it's like, you should meet someone where you're at with that skill set, So, and I think that people are afraid to realize when they've outgrown their coach because they feel bad.
No, that's a good point though.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I'm kind of processing the example. I don't like to throw names out, but I'm like, it's like,
yeah, but it's like, don't feel bad. That's where they are. And this is where you're going. And you need someone to carry you to where, or to help you to where you're going. Not carry you. They don't do all the work.
The one area I've slowly began to change my mind on a little bit is when they're at that level, my default used to be, the athlete should learn everything that they can about training. They should do a deep dive into the programming and all the other kind of stuff. Recently, I began to pivot my opinion on that just a little bit, because not every strength athlete wants to be a coach.
Well, you asked me that, and I said I didn't really.
Yeah.
I was just this passive. I was being taken on this powerlifting journey. And then there was a moment where I took a step back and I was like, oh, fuck, I need to prioritize this and look at it differently. Because before I was just like, teach me whatever you want. I'll do whatever you say. Yeah. And I think a lot of people get stuck in, I'll do whatever you say. And then maybe that's where the fear dynamic comes in, because they're just like, I'm just listening to my coach. Well, when do you ever question what your coach's ideations are, or what they know, or where they learn this, or how this applies to you? And then you get to that higher level of critical thinking, and it's like, oh, I need someone who knows their shit better.
Yeah. I mean, so the old me, and it's still 70%. So I'm not really in the middle yet. Is the answer would be when the athlete learns how to auto-regulate a lot of their training on their own, and then the coach mainly just becomes an advisor.
Yeah.
But that advisor needs to still be a higher level coach. The only reason I've started to kind of drop that percentage, because it used to be 100%. Like if you're really into this and you're doing shit that you're risking your health and your life, then you probably should know fucking how to periodize training. You should know, blood work. You should know certain variables, because to put all that accountability on somebody else for $150 a month,
yeah,
it's a little risky. But where I've dialed it back is I've met so many top lifters over the past couple of years that really don't have a fucking clue.
They're just great athletes.
And they got good coaches
and
too.
they thrive when they're told what to do by someone who knows. Yeah.
So I'm still not there yet, right? Yeah. I'm still like, it would probably help. It's not going to hurt. Let's just put it that way. So then it becomes, what else do you have going on in your life? Because if all you're doing is playing video games and doing online client for 20 people that you really don't give a fuck about, then there's no real excuse why you shouldn't be able to do a deep dive to learn more in some of these other things. And now if you're busy, you have 4 businesses and all this other shit, well, then you got to learn how to delegate and push things around, which will bring me to my next question for you, because you have like 9 businesses, or you have a lot of things, right? So when throughout this whole process, because you mentioned QuickBooks earlier, right? At what point were you comfortable delegating a lot of the things off?
When we made enough money to do so.
Yeah, well, that's obvious. But there's still some people that get stuck in that.
Yeah. I would say once I understood it enough to know that if there was a medium level question about it, I could answer it. I didn't feel comfortable, like even taxes. Like I worked with a business, they call it a teaching tax accountant, where you can have meetings with them and they talk to you about the strategies. And like some people are like, I just pay my tax guy to do it. And it's like, well, when you get the tax letter in the mail from the IRS, the tax guy isn't the one that's responsible for it. Like I made a large error when we started our business. I didn't file what's called a statement of information with our first business. And they don't necessarily tell you that you need to do that within 3 months of you filing your LLC. 4 years later, I got a letter from the IRS saying, you have to change it to a sole proprietor, and all of your taxes for the past 4 years are now null and void. And it was a huge, larger tax responsibility that we were going to have. And I was like, I fucked this up. And I was so mad at myself that I missed that. And luckily I was able to write a letter saying like, I'm an idiot and I had no idea what I was doing, and it fixed it. But I would say for me, it was when I knew enough to know like what was right and what was wrong. And I also feel like the same way with training, like I don't ever teach somebody where they need me. I teach them what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, so I can step away and they can do it themselves, whether it's through video analysis or biomechanical body feedback. And I feel that way with my business, where I want to know, I just do like massive amounts of research where it's like a Rubik's Cube and I need to know it from all sides, and then I can step away. Like I ask tons of questions. I'm probing, I'm inquisitive. And then once I feel like I've satiated the responses to those questions, then I can say, okay, you can do it now. So it was when I knew enough, because I never went to school for business. I never intended to be a business owner. So it took me a lot of personal time investment. Like I hardly ever watch TV because I'm doing research. Now I do, but before.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So it's like I spend the time, energy, and effort in things that are going to create and add value into my life.
All right. I'm going to take another break again, then we'll come back.
Sure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drink 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is, if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/Table Talk. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to EliteFTS.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
Matt with EliteFTS here at the Armory in Columbus, Ohio. This is a new build, beautiful facility. Should be opening up around November 1st, 2023. Looking at the posterior chain developer, signature version. It's going to have the logo panels on there. Reverse hypers, you can do glute ham raiser, back raise, any kind of posterior chain movement you want to do on this piece. This is really good. The best thing about this, so you just step down on the release, adjust it. So it makes it really easy to adjust these, no pop pins or anything like those sorts. So this is the signature posterior chain developer by EliteFTS.com.
All right, we're back. I'm going to piggyback on something that we were just talking about that I have in my notes, and I want to go a little bit deeper in it. And on the notes that you sent me, it was the coach burden of failure and success.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Jen Thompson hit on it a little bit. It's an interesting dynamic as a coach that when you have an athlete that does incredible, you feel incredible and you're rewarded and you're celebrated almost as if you get the credit for the athlete being awesome. And the inverse happens when your athlete bombs out, fails. I wouldn't say get injured on the platform, but when their performance is subpar. I'm talking not necessarily on the novice level. I'm talking a little bit more elite lifter here, that the coach and the athlete success are pretty much one and the same. And it is a significant burden of responsibility because although you are the coach, the athlete is still responsible for the majority of not only the performance, but the preparation and all of that. They could do something that they don't tell you. Like they could take a diuretic to cut and you don't know. And that could fuck with their profile, their electrolytes, everything. And then how are you rehydrating them properly? And just little things that ultimately the reflection of the performance, I feel like, is equitable, both on the coach and the athlete at the pro level or the elite level. And I feel like that's a very large responsibility that sometimes isn't what you want. You want the athlete to feel the success and to feel, or the failure, and not have it be so tied to your reputation as a coach.
As an athlete, I don't know if I'm grasping what you're saying. So as an athlete, if you failed, to kind of spin what you just said in a different direction, does that mean that failure falls more on the coach is why you failed?
I think so. As an elite athlete, I think they looked immediately at the coach like, what did they do wrong? As opposed to just the athlete. Maybe I'm off here, but this is just something that I've noticed and I see a lot, that at the pro level now, because everything is so highlighted in social media and on these live streams, that a lot of the burden of responsibility goes on the coaches. Like, why didn't they perform? And why was this prep so bad? And I feel like it should be shifted more to the athlete than the coach, but I feel like it's pretty equitable in both regards.
I get what you're saying now. And I'm wondering from a societal standpoint that as the sports become more mainstream, this is the case with any pro sport.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, you have a losing season and the head coach gets fired.
Yeah, well, actually, to back that into that, the good head coach is always going to take responsibility and accountability. Right? When anything goes wrong, and then they're always going to give credit to the athletes when things go well. That's kind of that's the role of a leader and the role of a coach.
Yeah.
Right? To be in that. And yeah, it's going to weigh heavy. That's why they get paid what they do. But no, I'm powerlifting coach.
I think that's why I wrote that note, is because that was one of the reasons why I like being an educator so much more than the coach, because you can't extrapolate all of the variables that happen in a prep and in a competition and all that and just blame it on the coach for the athlete failing. And that was something that I struggled with. Like, I had an elite athlete that I fired. She was one of the best athletes I ever had. And I couldn't control her behavior enough to where I felt comfortable coaching her. And I had an athlete who unfortunately became addicted to opiates. and didn't tell me, and her performance was just tanking. And I felt so responsible, and I couldn't figure out, and I thought it was something I did wrong. And then eventually she told me that that's what happened. And it's like, oh, it wasn't my fault, but I felt so responsible.
Yeah.
And that's why, one of the reasons why, because I feel so culpable and I care so much, that like coaching was difficult for me.
Well, I get that. And this is what's running through my head right now is this is just more validation that the sport's becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, there's people I know that hate that, you know, and wish it would all go back to being, you know, basement gyms. But, you know, there's good and bad, you know, with everything that kind of goes out there. And if that's what we're seeing now, I would see that as a good growth point, you know, for the sport, where the coaches need to do. I mean, if that's the case, and I'm sure it is, it probably isn't as with every coach and every athlete. That'd be a broad statement, which is usually not fair to make. But, you know, if that is the case, then it is up to the coach to be able to act like, you know, a coach that works with pro athletes. If they're not complying, you fire them the same way they're going to get traded, you know, if they're on a pro sport team or whatever it is. Not so much because of the relationship with that individual, but it's going to impact the relationship with the other 20 individuals that you have.
Yeah.
So you can't let one individual end up pulling down the other 19.
Yeah.
You know, that's where that leadership issue kind of comes into that. And it's, you have staff that you've worked with, you see the same things can happen there.
Yeah.
You know, one rotten egg can pull down a whole lot of other ones, but you always want to try to help, you know, the rotten egg. But the coach has to decide then what are the values and what are the morals that are going to be standard, you know, to create the operating systems per se moving forward.
Yeah. Or then they are getting more of your attention because they're kind of bringing the team down.
Yeah.
And then that's not fair to the rest of the bunch.
Yeah.
And I think that's a criticism that a lot of elite level coaches get, is that they only pay attention to their elite athletes.
Yeah.
When they have a full roster of, you know, all in the middle, but maybe that elite athlete does require more attention because they are an elite athlete. And I think that is a whole other,
it could be
a whole other topic of conversation, but that's a large criticism that I hear. Well, he or she only pays attention to so-and-so because they're the best. And it's like, well, maybe so-and-so is putting in more effort and giving it the best, and they have a bigger competition, and maybe they need a little bit more of my time right now.
Yeah.
And they're in prep and you're not. And I don't know. I think that interpersonal dynamic of the relationship that goes way beyond the $150 a month is another reason why I just...
Well, that's where I say it's broken too, right? Yeah. Because that's a lot of burden to handle for that. Yeah. Right. And when I hear other things like, you know, the coach only pays attention to this one thing, whenever I hear statements like that, the first question that flashes through my mind with anything is that really real? Like, because we live in this fake world, you know, of social media where most of what we see is just not real. And what's real is us sitting here talking in real life. I mean, is that real life? You see that? So that's a fucked up thing to have to sit there and ask, but that's kind of the world that we live in. It could be, but it also may not be. It could be just because they're more visible. Yeah. You know, that is perceived that way, then that coach is going to use that person more in their dialect and their marketing, because that's going to be able to help pull in more people. Right. Where the reality, maybe if you spoke to that coach, they have this new lifter that's only been training for 2 years that's just blowing their text up 24/7. And so you don't know, right? So it's especially in the world of powerlifting, and it's in a good place because it's growing, I think. Absolutely. But it's going to have more speed bumps along the way. Like this whole coaching thing's going to have to iron itself out. You know, the athlete thing's going to have to iron the meets. There's a lot of things in progress. Yeah. Which is, it's got a good foundation because it's been around for 50 some years. So there is a good foundation for that, as long as lifters and those that are helping to make the sport grow, so not lifters per se, can think with critical minds. Yeah. And not get wrapped into groupthink, or what sometimes I'll call old head think. You know, a lot of federations just get stuck with all these old heads and no longer lift anymore. So it's just all this old head think, and it's not critical thinking. So a lot kind of gets lost in that. Yeah. I spoke with JP Price a little bit about that, because he was talking about the WRPF, and I'm like, well, what things are in place to not create that? Yeah. Because you guys aren't old heads yet. Right. You know, but I've seen this like 15 years down the road, like what's in place with that. some of the other topics I wanted to circle back to that we missed was with the injuries, the cervical spine and neck. That kind of ranks up there with some of the more frequent complaints. So what were your thoughts on that?
I don't see a ton of those injuries in my practice. I actually converse with a lot of people online about that. I would say it's more nerve injuries that people have stemming from the cervical spine that is impairing their arms or their biceps and, their push and their press. I said I have an interesting theory on that. I think that having a tight neck actually helps with powerlifting because it helps create stability, and especially in something like a deadlift, you're not getting like a whiplash reaction when you're putting the bar down or something like that. But I would say I see a lot of nerve related injuries where people get herniations in their cervical spine that impair then the function in their arms. And I would say it's a lot of people who squat really heavy.
Yeah, the nerve injuries are a common thing. So how do you assess and look at and treat and work with the athletes that are contending with that?
So I recommend to a lot of people to get EMG testing, electrical myographical something. It's where you...
It's on the tip of my mind.
Yeah.
It'll come out. Keep going.
So where you stick a needle in there and they put an electrode in it, and you can see the nerve and the muscle function output. I think that is it's painful, but it's minimally invasive. Clinically speaking, where you can actually see where the innervation is having an issue, because just getting an MRI and seeing the herniation doesn't really tell you shit. Almost everybody over the age of 50 has one. Over the age of 30, 60% of people have one, and it's whether or not it's causing an issue. So targeting that and then getting with someone who knows what they're doing to help you address and fix it. A lot of people want to try to keep pushing through the pain, but when it comes to nerve related injuries, a lot of the times the push can equal a setback and it can damage your nerves even further. And some people don't realize that nerves aren't the same as muscles, where more power equals more output. A lot of the times more power can mean less output, because either your central nervous system shutting it off to save itself, or you're pinching it off more and you're creating an environment that's going to be more detrimental long term. So I think when it comes to something like that, getting with a specialist, an orthopedic specialist, to really tell you where you're at is important, because in my opinion, the spine is something you just don't want to fuck with. The spine and the feet are two things you don't want to have surgery on, like ever, because they're just never the same once you do.
The nerve thing through, God, I can go all the way back to Louis because he had all kinds of nerve problems, is there's another side of the whole injury spectrum, which is you begin to identify with what that injury is. And then nerve injuries seem to be outside of the lower back, the one thing that almost becomes part of the person's identity, which sometimes I question if that inhibits their ability to ever get back from the whole thing, because they'll have like good runs and think it's gone.
Yep.
And then
it's this elusive thing that doesn't have a predictable pain pattern like a musculoskeletal injury. So, I mean, injuries can be musculoskeletal, they can be nerve, or they can be articular or bone. And it's very easy to assess which one is which, but nerves, they don't fit the same pattern of, I do this movement and it hurts. Sometimes I have power in my arm, sometimes I don't.
Yeah, that's
and
the bad one.
They're the most frustrating injuries that there are. And a lot of people just give up when they have it. And for a lot of people, it's actually the better move, because sometimes you've damaged something so bad that the integrity of the structure is now compromised and you can't outlift that.
Yeah. Well, that becomes another conversation in itself. Yeah. Because some people may never stop, if an injury doesn't take them out.
Yep.
Right. And I've known many of them where sometimes those things can be a blessing because it forces, the exit, where the other times it sucks because they're in their prime. Yeah. And then it's trying to figure out, I don't know anybody that's really figured that one out. Have you found ways with them to at least get them through the last 6 weeks without it? Because sometimes they just lose complete strength.
I think cervical traction is a super underutilized tool that people don't understand. You can get an over-the-door traction device. You can go and buy a really great medical grade like Saunders cervical traction where you're on an incline and you're using a pump and you can moderate the pressure on offer up because someone got it from a surgery and they don't need it anymore, and it's $1,000 tool that you can get for $75. I think people don't understand how the spine works enough, and they don't have someone in their wheelhouse that can educate them. Because once you say, oh, you have a nerve root impingement at, C4, it's like, oh, well, stop. And that's what, like, I hate when people go to traditional medical doctors because the answer is don't lift weights. What are you talking about? Yeah. You need to stop immediately. I'm sure you've been told that a million times. Yeah. You're never going to squat again. Mm-hmm. And I think this is more of like, back to that, find the providers that work for you. Like, you may need to shop around. It may be frustrating. Talk to other people who you see getting treatment and find that person that works for you. But there's, home remedies. So I think anti-inflammatories are great. I think steroid injections can be great, but have negative consequences and side effects, as we kind of were talking about. But I think traction, just in and of itself, is a tool that people don't utilize farly enough.
You do the education and the seminars, right? And so you're leaning more into that. Mm-hmm. And I do, by the way, agree that that's the direction to go, especially with the knowledge that you have, because you can cover more ground, help more people. And, individually, even with 20 clients,
right?
So that's almost wasted talent, with a lack of a more proper way to say that.
I had to come to that realization.
To do that with the education and the experience that you have, you can impact way more. So then those coaches can then impact their athletes. And so it becomes a broader thing. I'm also biased because my company is all education. It's been education since day one. Oh, and by the way, thank you for the PP article. I was looking through.
Can we
the
just
other
say PPB?
Yeah, PPB, or whatever it was. I remember when Sheena sent that to me. I'm like, post it now. Like, this needs to go up, because it was a thing. It was like
it was super hot.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, when was that? A couple years ago.
It was last year. Hunter had a video that went like 2 million views viral of her, having some. So it's either called stress urinary incontinence or athletic incontinence is a term that's been coined that I like more. Of her urinating while deadlifting, and people just don't understand it. And I made a video about it, and it went pretty viral. And I was like, I'm going to write an article about this because I want to actually dive into some of the literature and research to see if it was even out there. Mm-hmm. And it is in the powerlifting and strength sport community, but not to the level of what women do and are capable of in our sport. But I at least laid out a broad kind of format template of like, this is normal to experience this, and this is why you experience this, and in the squat and in the deadlift. And at this level, you probably should seek some help because it may not be considered normal. Some people say no amount of urination expelled is normal, and I completely disagree with that. And that's coming from pelvic floor physical therapists who are experts in this field. And I say, can you squat what you can bicep curl? No. And there's a reason for it. The muscles of the bladder and the urethra are so short that you put that much pressure on it. And of course, it's not going to be able to withstand and tolerate the load of what your entire body system can carry. And I think that as powerlifting gets more popular and more mainstream, people are seeing it more, but the stigma is still there. And it hurts to hear, I got kicked out of my gym because of it. And I don't lift weights anymore because of it. And, I did a survey I actually reread my article to refresh my brain in case it brought up of 158 women, and hearing some of their responses, I put just some questions and then some text boxes, and it was heartbreaking to hear I quit my sport because I was getting made fun of. And not every woman has the financial ability or the desire to wear a diaper or a pad while they're training. It may not be comfortable. Like, I thought about it, like, if I was going for a max deadlift and I put on, a diaper for the first time, it would probably mess me up mentally, mechanically. And it's also, those are expensive. Like, maybe you don't have the means to do that and you're lifting in your garage or, and that's a female burden that in a male dominated industry that not a lot of men understand. And they just stigmatize it instead of taking a moment to understand that there's a mechanical reason why this is happening.
Yeah. I would say find a powerlifting gym.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because we'd be like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless it becomes problematic where it's like on the bent over rows and shit.
Right.
It's like, fuck yeah. You know?
Yeah. I mean, and it's not like, I think what made me mad when reading some of the comments on those posts is people think that women are doing this volitionally. Like, yeah, I'm going to go up there and piss.
Yeah.
Like, how could you even connect the two? But it's like, no, this isn't something that you think they want to go up there.
Yeah.
It's like, no. And it happened at the pro, and people were in the chat like, what's coming out of her body? Someone asked, and I was like, that's urination. I took a moment to have some education, but it happens. And it shouldn't deter a female from doing the sport, especially when you've had a kid and, your pelvic floor and that anatomy is different. And there are resources and tools that you can use to help mitigate that or to help try to train your body to have it be different. Some of it comes from improper bracing. And I actually used to teach what you know, not what's right. I was taught to brace, like bear down, like you're taking shit. That is how you are going to expel urine 100%. Like that is not the appropriate way. You don't want to be pushing down. And men don't even realize that a man can expel urine. Or
shit.
Yeah. Or shit. I've done that. I think the intensity factor is there. And it's just, I hope to write more articles, from this weird educational PT / powerlifting background that I have to kind of open people's eyes up to different views that maybe they didn't see before.
Well, that was going to be my next question because I asked earlier about, your future as a lifter and you're in a weird space, right?
I do have an answer.
Yes.
Now that we've had this discussion,
yes.
I didn't think of it before. So I am actually selling my gym. It was a decision that I made the moment that my husband passed. My desire to own and operate Southbay Strength Company passed as well. Although I'm fully capable of running the business, I just don't want to. It feels good to be there as a lifter. It feels terrible to be there as the owner. Like I cry a lot. I feel bad a lot. It's a living reminder that my life will never be the same and I don't want it anymore. Excuse me. But what I want to do is continue to educate. So what I plan on doing, and I haven't set this in stone, it's an idea that I have that I will do. I want to do a national parks tour and I want to pair that with a clinic tour. So I want to be a traveling lady with my dogs and my truck and go and do educational clinics and seminars and teach people proper squat, bench, deadlift mechanics, or do an injury prevention clinic, do a coach's clinic, do different types of seminars at different locations to teach people and spread the education and knowledge that I have because I feel like it's invaluable.
Didn't Jen just do something like that?
I believe she did.
Yeah. So that's kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah. And I want to pair it with the national parks. And then after that, I don't necessarily know, but I would love to do more videos and just, like how Andrew Locke does, more broad-based education where I'm reaching a larger audience with the skill set that I have, as opposed to just being in Southbay Strength Company. And I do clinics all the time and they sell out, but I'm reaching the same audience. And I want to reach a broader audience. And this is going to give me a way to utilize the backbone of what we created with Southbay Strength Company and the recognition that I've got in the industry by having this gym and being an athlete, and take that into the next chapter of my powerlifting career, where I do still want to be an athlete. And I do just think I want to do some local meets. I think I'm just feeling that way because I'm injured, where I'm like, fuck this big meet thing. I spent all this money for nothing. And, just get back to enjoying the sport a little bit more, because I think at the top you get so much pressure that it takes a little bit of enjoyment out of it, and then also give back to the community in a meaningful way, because I think that that's what a lot of elite lifters miss the mark on, is that so many people are watching them, whether they realize it or not. And what the fuck are you doing with that? What are you doing with that besides posting your list online? If you have, I've been in this sport for a long time now, and I have a lot to share that I only wish I would have known when I was starting. And I hope only to get the opportunity to share that with people in the future. And that's what I'm planning on doing.
Well, a few things. I mean, from the business perspective, you've grown the gym to a point that to exit would be a good time.
Yeah, I'm going to be a very rich lady and I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good thing. But you are also correct about, the lifters and that's not today's lifters either. It's lifters throughout history. When you get to a certain point, you're already in a bubble, but then you're a bubble in a bubble. And then all you really know is what's going on, like at that top part, and maybe with clients that you work with, but that's kind of it. And you can slowly begin to lose sight of the person that just does a meet for their first time, or goes to a meet with 3 weeks of training and benches 185 or whatever it was, and changes the trajectory of their entire life That's where the real impact of powerlifting is made. It's not made with the world records and all the other stuff. You can validate this just by going on open powerlifting and just scrolling down.
Yeah.
Like the top lifters focus on the top 30, but scroll down and look at how many are underneath that.
Yeah.
Those are the people that their life trajectory can change or may have changed because they did that first meet. And then stepping outside of that, there's, what we never had before are people who powerlift that don't compete.
Yeah.
And that there's no way to measure that, but it's way more than that's on open powerlifting.
Yeah.
That's freaking huge with that. And that's where that education setting kind of falls into all that because it covers all them and maybe they will compete. Or maybe the bottom competitors will realize, holy shit, I can be way better than what I am because of that. But unfortunately with that top end, because you have that laser focus and all this other stuff, and it's completely understandable, sometimes they'll lose sight of why they started in the first place.
Yeah. Or their bandwidth to do more than just being that elite athlete is not there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you plan to relocate or are you going to stay in Cali?
I'm not sure. When I came here, I had the intention of reliving my life. I'm from Ohio and I was like, I'm going to move back home. And I felt so excited. And I got off the plane. I was like, this is home. And then immediately I was like, no.
And then there's like flurries yesterday.
Yeah. I experienced all 4 seasons in one day. And I just think I'm not ready to settle down yet. I feel like coming back here would be the epitome of settling down. And what I think I want is a little bit more excitement and invigoration because if you would have asked me 5 years ago, 6 years ago, do you think you're going to have this gym that's this now iconic pillar in the city of Los Angeles? I'd be like, what? Fuck no. I know the iconic gyms in Los Angeles and now we are one. And so I don't know where life is going to take me and I'm excited to figure it out now. I'm forced with a decision that I never wanted to make, but I'm trying to look at it as a positive, as who in the middle of their working life career just gets to take a fucking second and reevaluate if that's what you really want or what can you turn this into? And someone told me the other day when I was telling them that I wanted to sell the gym, because I'm not selling it. Well, I am selling it, but I don't have a contracted buyer or anything. So I'm still in the process. Yeah. And they're like, man, I didn't know that this wasn't your idea. What do you think you could do with something that was your idea? If you created this with Steven and it was his idea. And I was like, I never thought of it that way.
Just make sure if it doesn't work out, you're fucked.
Right? I need that pressure. Yeah. So I'm excited to figure it out. But what I'm so passionate about is making sure that I get to spread my seed of education. Since I'm not going to have kids now, I want to foster and enrich. I realized the other day that I'm the age that my mentors were when I got into powerlifting, when they were showing me the ropes. And now I'm doing that for this generation upcoming. And they have so much more access to things that, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't, with the internet and with how visual the sport is becoming and how it's becoming where it's bodybuilding, where people know it colloquially in any, fitness industry. And if we can have more resources to teach people so that the longevity of a powerlifter is more than 2 to 3 years, whether they're losing interest or getting injured, which is usually the reason why people come out of the sport, is because they get hurt and they don't want to do it anymore. But if I can give people the tools early on to not have that be their outcome, the sport is going to grow even more, because the longer you stay in it, the stronger, typically, unless you're doing it wrong, the stronger you get.
Yeah. What's the best way for people to follow you? Is it Instagram?
Yeah. I don't really have many other social medias.
Yeah. Well, there's a link tree on there, which takes to seminars and stuff like that as well. Yeah.
So it's just VeggieLifter. I'm on there. I respond to all my DMs, everything. And I love, people like DMing, they're like, oh, I didn't think you were going to respond. It's like, I'm a real fucking person. Like, I love being able to just help people on their journey when they kind of feel like maybe that they're alone or that nobody knows what they're going through, but there's always someone who does.
Mm-hmm. You have any final thoughts?
I'm just really stoked that I had the opportunity to do this. This is so cool. And I think what you've been doing for as long as I've been born, since you started this in 88, right? I just think is extraordinary. And I think in such a fast-paced environment, take the time to take a step back and look at things instead of just looking for what's next and looking for what's next. Oh, you hit 315. All right, 350's coming. You hit 405, 450's coming. Take a moment to let it sink in, and also take a moment to critically think about your environment and what your choices are and what's next. Don't just follow what everybody else is doing, because that might not be the best path for you. And that's about it.
I want to thank you for coming out. This has been great sitting down speaking to you. I could keep going if you didn't have a flight.
I know.
I could keep going for another couple hours. But again, it's been great speaking to you. And if you need any help with the education, stuff like that, just send me a message.
Thank you so much, Dave.
All right, guys, we're done.